What's the most pathetic thing you've seen someone do for attention? I knew a woman who, as a college student, went to Australia for one semester. She came back with the accent and just kept it. When I knew her, this had been going on for more than 5 years. She was from North Carolina.
So, you blokes and Sheilas, what are your stories?
Worst one I've got is an old friend who lied about being in the parachute regiment of the British Army. He spouted his usual, we parachuted into X and Y with GPMGs, and all that, yada yada yada. No tactical drops have been executed in years, by the way. I just let him roll with it. I couldn't be bothered to argue with him on the principle that he was a tosser. Anyway, we ended up going out one night, and a couple of my friends, who happened to be paras and went into the regiment roughly the same time he did, came drinking with us. Anyway, sparking up some conversation. The two were in on this about army days, and this one frickin' guy starts chucking it in. Yep, I was this and that. And then the two guys stop deadpan and go, "So, you just said you jumped in Nation X. First bat never jumped there." This being said as they both rolled up their right sleeves, and there, proudly displayed, was the para logo with "First" underneath. I've never seen someone retract into his chair so quickly. After we left the bar, he decided to go home as he wasn't feeling well. Always funny to remind him of that when his ego gets a tad too big. When I was in high school, there was a pretty bad bus accident where a bus driver fell asleep at the wheel and a lot of people were hurt, some very badly. One girl was in a coma and sustained brain damage, another walks permanently with a limp and has facial scarring, one guy had the bones in 2 of his fingers crushed and now the mobility of his hand is permanently affected. I went to a really small high school and it was a pretty big deal. It was a national news story for a few days as well. If you're curious, pretty much everyone on that bus that crashed sued anyone who was remotely associated with the accident, from the owner of the bus company to the teachers who were on the bus with the students, and some people got quite a bit of money. Anyway, there was one girl who claimed all sorts of damage from the accident. She came back to school wearing a brace on her leg and her arm, and would cry if anyone mentioned the accident and made up terrific stories about the crash itself and the nightmares she was having. She would just go on and on in a really ridiculous way about the accident. Came to find out she wasn't even on the bus that crashed. She was on another bus. In the scramble of craziness after the accident, she went to the accident and pretended to have been on the bus and made up all of her injuries. Looking back, she was clearly damaged, just not by that and not just physically. She was always just kind of a little off. This is just the only really specific incident I can point to illustrate her strangeness. Oh boy, I hate everything about this, including the fact that the teachers somehow got sued into the bargain here when they were likely just as badly off as the kids. But yeah, if you see a mass tragedy and get the urge to run over, lie down and fake cry just to get some much-needed validation, just don't. This girl in high school I was kind of friends with liked this guy in her math class. To get his attention, she fell out of her desk in the middle of class. Then she did it the next day, and the next day. That was her plan to get him to ask her to prom. It didn't work. On sister's wedding day, our aunt put herself into diabetic shock on purpose. An ambulance came, she could have died. My sister had to administer her until the ambulance showed up. The sister was a nurse. All because people were paying attention to the bride instead of my aunt.
Jeez, that's terrible. I was playing cello at the wedding where the bride's mom apparently disapproved of the wedding and had threatened to make a fuss. She wore black. Then during the whole ceremony, she cried loudly, shook her head, and muttered at the vows. Turns out she'd done this at all of her children's weddings, so I think she might just be a terrible person. Claimed to be a vampire for 5 to 10 years. They started in high school and continued into her 20s. She did this until her fiancé threatened to leave her. My girlfriend's sister, we'll call her Kerry for the sake of these stories, is the queen of doing unnecessary, pathetic things to get attention. She overdramatizes everything and does whatever she can to bring the attention to her. When there's nothing to overdramatize, she just makes stuff up. About herself, her family, about her friends, about whoever or whatever. Just blatantly lies for attention. My favorite example? A guy Kerry barely knew in college who was several years older than her, but ran in a similar social circle, unexpectedly committed self-deletion after a fight with his then-girlfriend one night. It was a really sad event on campus. He was a really great guy that was widely known and widely liked. However, he was diagnosed mentally ill with depression and schizophrenia. He was off his meds for some reason and he was drinking heavily with disastrous results. All of a sudden, Kerry is hyper-depressed and telling everyone that would listen that she was having a secret romantic relationship with him, that they were in love and that he was planning on leaving his girlfriend for her, and that they were planning on eloping together.
She started telling everyone about how much she missed him, how she couldn't stand to be alone, yada yada yada. The guy's actual girlfriend caught wind and confronted Kerry about it publicly. Kerry started to back off, saying, "Okay, maybe I overstated how involved we were. I made the stuff up about eloping, but we were definitely hooking up and he told me he loved me." When pressed further, she started to ramp down her story more and more. Okay, we only hooked up once, but he said he really liked it and wanted to do it again. Then, okay, we never hooked up, but we spent a lot of time together privately and I really cared about him. It finally came down to, okay, fine, I only met him like once at a party and we barely talked, but I liked him and wish I could have spent more time with him. Are you happy? Why do you have to be so mean? I was just trying to feel like I fit in. Who cares if I made things up about him? It made me feel like I was part of his life. So she was spreading lies about this kid who had just died, and even after she was called out on her bullcrap, she still needed to make it about her, and how everyone was so mean to her, and how she didn't deserve to be treated like that. That's just one of many such examples. I had a friend who made up a fake girl named Melissa on MySpace. Clearly, this was a while ago. She said Melissa was coming to our school next year and was currently being homeschooled in another town. Everyone became friends with fake MySpace Melissa, and one of our guy friends actually started falling for her. He asked for her cell, apparently she didn't have one. He asked if he could hang out with her. Apparently her parents wanted to move away from our town because she wasn't paying attention to her schoolwork. So the guy asks if he can at least meet her before she moves. This is where my friend had panicked. She was the one pretending to be Melissa. And she made up a whole story that Melissa got into a car accident. The next day she tells us Melissa is in a coma. A week later her parents take her off life support. The guy eventually put 2 and 2 together and exposed my friend in the middle of school in front of everyone. It was amazing. Desiree Jennings supposedly received a swine flu vaccination and was not able to walk as she was once able to. It was a whole news event. In 2009, she was interviewed about her new disability and most people believed her story. Heck, even I did at the time. However, as it turns out, she had been seen in public and was miraculously cured. And sometimes she even had a foreign accent. Strangely, Bill O'Reilly was one of the first people to call bullcrap when the original interview was aired. This may not have been Desiree seeking attention, but a group who is anti-vaccination spreading untruths about the issue as a scare tactic or attention grab. I had a friend claim to me she had a fiancé that was in the US Marine Corps and extremely rich. She used to talk about how he was planning on opening a billiards or hookah lounge. But to our mutual friend, she claimed they were both vampires and he was hiding from a vampire hunter. This was after the Twilight movies and books came out and she claimed she knew the author and the books were about them. She finally built up the courage to tell me her little secret herself as I kept from laughing. The mutual friend and I tried placing bets that he would never show up, nor would his business ever exist, but there was no other person to go against our call of bullcrap. Needless to say, I think the vampire hunter got him because he never showed up and the business does not exist. I don't really talk to her anymore. I don't befriend people with no pulse. Plus, I hate Twilight. Okay, so far in this video, if I had a nickel for every time a legal adult claimed to be a vampire for attention, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it is weird that it happened twice. At a crowded party, saw someone poop in an empty pizza box. She was a total attention seeker. I was talking to a girl at a bar who I honestly was not remotely interested in, and this D-bag who I didn't even know walked up and said, "Hey, what's up? Oh, dude, am I jock blocking you?" You remember that girl with the Flickr account who had hundreds of pictures with her face badly photoshopped in? That was pretty bad, and so very sad. A girl in my high school used to fake all kinds of injuries. At one point, she said she hurt her back and couldn't carry her books to class. So, what did she do? She pushed them around on a damn computer chair. She was in a wheelchair for graduation, not because she actually needed it. Even her parents complained about it. She was the most ridiculous attention seeker I've ever seen. Followed closely by a girl who faked 3 pregnancies. About the time she should have gotten ultrasound pics, she always lost the baby. Sure, I've known people that have actually lost kids that way. It's terrible. Screw anyone that fakes that and wants my sympathy. Protest funerals. Granted, a certain amount of that was lawsuit baiting, but I'm sure some of it has to do with a psychotic need for attention. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My aunt and her boyfriend are just made for each other. My aunt is determined to show that anything me or my mum can do, she can do better. I passed my driving test, she bought a car she couldn't drive, crashed it on purpose into her own fence because my car was nicer. This was an excuse to make my grandmother buy her a new one. She also got both of our eyebrows pierced and looked like an owl because I once said when I was 15 I wanted one eyebrow pierced. I was a big Evanescence fan at the time. She got her lip pierced, which ended up going horribly wrong and got infected because I'd once said I wanted it done. She started trying for another child because my mother had my baby brother. She was unsuccessful because her boyfriend was infertile. He didn't tell her this. And now for her boyfriend, which is equally hilarious. When my aunt first met him, he sent her tracks from his band. They were terrible, but my aunt loved them. She let me listen to one of them that he'd sent her a few days before, claiming it was a new song they'd just written. Turns out it was CKY, Skeletor vs. Beastman. He vehemently denied it. Then, when he finally decided to move in with my aunt, he revealed about himself that he was possessed by the Archangel Gabriel. Whenever someone said Gabriel 3 times, he'd seem as if he was having an epileptic fit, which was grossly inappropriate seeing as my uncle died in '96 of one. And then he'd speak in some sort of pathetic possessed voice for half an hour. He did this frequently whenever we tried to prove it, until my older brother got wind of it. My brother didn't stop, and after doing it 3 times in about an hour, the boyfriend stopped doing it. He's never done it since. He's an oddball who doesn't shower. We spend as little time with him as humanely possible. On another note, an ex-boyfriend of mine created an entirely new identity via email to message me on how I would never be good enough for him. He was apparently a girl called Hannah. She said that she was going to get him away from me because she was better. Repeatedly getting fake pregnant and then saying she had lost the baby. Or people faking cancer. I've known 1 or 2 of those. Airing dirty laundry on Facebook. It's so common and half the fools don't even realize how pathetic they are. No one fudging cares about your bullshit problems. That one Jewish university student who painted Third Reich symbols on her own dorm room door. It would have been awesome if they charged her with anti-Semitic hate crimes. They should have. If she's not the only Jewish student there, she's effectively terrorizing all of the others. Who did this to her? Am I next kind of thing? The whole school should get together and kick her butt. My brother had moved back home while his marriage was on hiatus. He was home for about a month when he died in a car accident. About a week before he passed, he had randomly hooked up with this incredibly horrible woman at a bar. She was under the impression that they were soulmates and were going to build this incredible free-spirited life together, even though my entire family told her that she needed to get lost and that he was just doing the deed with her to deal with the pain of his marital problems. This woman finds out about his death from a mutual friend and starts calling the family at all hours of the night, telling us how much she loved him and how she didn't know how she was going to live. She even called his wife and gave her every little detail about their one-night affair and told her that he never loved her. Finally, I decided enough is enough, and I tell her that if she ever contacts my family again, she's going to have about 15 angry, grieving women jump up and down on her. A few days go by and it's time to have the funeral. We held a memorial service above our family restaurant. I go downstairs to get a drink, and there she is, sitting at the bar, and just walks up to me and asks if it's okay for her to come to the service. I very bluntly tell her no and give her a little insight into what will happen if she so much as pokes her head into the room. Not more than an hour goes by and I see this woman upstairs talking to my brother's widow. She sees me approaching her and instantly goes into hysteria, screaming and yelling, sobbing and pointing her finger in people's faces, ranting about how she was my brother's one true love. My mum walked right up behind her, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her out the door and kicked her down the stairs. Oh boy. Although it's terrible that he died, it seems like the silver lining was that he didn't have to put up with the fallout from that one-night stand. Then again, maybe she'd have laid off quicker if she had the reality of the guy telling her he didn't feel that way, and to get lost rather than the silent, perfect image of a man she was with one time before she never saw him again. It all sucks in any case. Freshman year, so this totally should have worked. There was this very cute girl who had plenty of guys flirting with her. She randomly starts talking about the piercings on her chest. The conversation hadn't been about tattoos or piercings. No one says anything. She starts kind of cradling her chesty bits and telling everyone that she's got charms on the piercings. Nobody says anything. She asks if we want to see them. Nobody says anything. Spent the next few minutes looking really sad, still cradling herself. I almost took pity on her, but if the guys didn't want to see, and I didn't actually want to see, why bother? Oh god, drunken flashback. Some girl at a club did something like this, and then when I was all, no, I'd rather not see your chest, she acted like I must be gay or broken or something. as if the thought that she was unattractive and showing strangers yourself is not something that everyone would want never even crossed her mind. Hey, what do you mean you don't want to see my eggplant, random woman in public? Are you a lesbian or something? My mother-in-law bought a pure white beaded long gown with illusion neckline and wore it in my wedding. I wasn't even wearing white myself. My cat, knocking all of my stuff onto the floor just so I'll give her a midnight snack. She always pushes the items slowly across the table so you can hear this long, annoying scraping noise before they crash to the floor. Then she looks at me for a moment to evaluate effectiveness. When she senses I'm drifting back to sleep, she knocks something else off. My teacher was reading passages from books, and one of them was about a girl who was adopted, and this one girl, Rebecca, ran out of the room crying. Later that day, she made the teacher apologize for talking about adopted kids because she was adopted. Get that attention, girl. There's so many stories from my high school. One of my teachers was a very well-respected historian, and he was teaching a class about civil rights, and he said, "I'm going to say the N-word, but not out of disrespect. You just need to understand the exact examples I'm giving, okay?" And then when he said that the signs would say, "Keep N-words out of our schools," a group of 2 to 3 girls stood up and ran out screaming, "Oh, hell no, he didn't, that racist white boy." They tried getting him in trouble with the administration, but they were like, no, he's teaching you about civil rights. They probably weren't listening to the teacher at all until they heard that word. This is my biggest pet peeve. So, where do I begin? A guy I was friendly with in high school boasted constantly about being a published author. Having read his work myself, because he would constantly shove it under the nose of anyone he was around, which is a red flag of a terrible artist, I knew that no publishing house in their right mind would ever put their money behind that crap. Turns out he just paid a huge sum of money to some guy on the internet to print out 300 of his books, which sat in boxes in his room. Also, he had the worst BO of anyone I've ever encountered ever. In college, I came across another repeat attention hussy offender, in the form of a really hot girl that ran with our group. Being really hot her whole life, she simply assumed that the attention was to be focused on her at all times. She drank heavily, shocking I know, and whenever she was drunk, which was always, she'd literally scream over other people who were talking. She'd pull girls out of guys' laps so she could sit there, take out her chest when no one was looking at her, and cry for hours over supposed injuries like scraping her knee on the carpet. She left school and I couldn't be happier. Bethany Storrow, who faked an acid attack on herself, except that she actually used chemicals to burn her own face. She told the police that a black woman wearing a ponytail came up to her with a cup of something and said, "Hey pretty woman, want a drink of this?" and splashed the acid in her face. Bethany got a lot of sympathy and donations, but she eventually confessed to having splashed her own face with acid for attention. She has ruined her face with chemicals, all for some recognition. How humiliating. Seeing her videos pre-confession, whining about getting attacked and thanking Jesus for the strength she's found in herself, makes my skin crawl. I know a guy who pretended he had a cancerous tumor in his chest. He shaved his head and eyebrows and had a real, "I'm so sad, everyone pity me" demeanor. That was until my friend told his parents that she was so sorry to hear about him being sick, and they didn't know what she was talking about. Roll on his miraculous recovery. I was told a girl that I work with made up a boyfriend in high school. He'd send her cute texts and everything. When her friends would ask her to bring him up to hang out and meet, he was always unavailable. Then one day, he self-deleted for no reason. It's unreal what people will do. Celebrity Big Brother. I like this one. Short, succinct, and yes, washed-up celebrities doing just anything for a sweet, sweet taste of that old limelight. Well done, commenter. My sister lied about getting rid of a pregnancy. She called me out of the blue one night, crying and frantic, and explained that she'd gotten an operation to remove her 5th kid. She was only in her early 20s, had never held down a job, and couldn't care for the other 4. So I figured I'd just try and be supportive, nothing to be done about it after the fact, right? Turns out she was lying. She was just curious about how I'd react, so she kept me on the phone, acting like she wanted to end things, for most of an evening. I guess she didn't have anyone else to talk to. My brother did the same accent thing from the first story, except he'd only gone to school an hour and a half away from home and somehow picked up an English accent. It was sad, but hardly registers in the top 10 for my family. In short, my sister called me saying she wanted to not be alive about a termination she never had. Most of the people I've met who are ex-military and were special forces, like SEALs or Rangers, I swear it seems like 98% of people who served claimed to have been in the top 5% of eliteness. Back when I was wasting my time on World of Warcraft, I had a guild member email me unsolicited eggplant pics in an attempt to win my heart. I knew a guy who pretended to write this crappy pop-punk song and recorded it himself. After some Googling, turns out the song was by a crappy pop-punk band. When confronted, he claimed he helped give the band the ideas for the song. Yeah, okay. What are the dumbest questions you've had to field out of nowhere? A few months ago, a TSA officer asked me about the intention of your eyeglasses. I told him, so that I can see, and went on my way. My friend was stopped by a TSA agent after arriving at LAX and taken into a separate room for questioning. He has a lazy eye and looks like he's on something pretty much all of the time. Another agent walked up to his dad and asked in a really aggressive voice, "Is there anything you don't know about your son that we should know about?" A TSA agent in Vermont was checking out my hunting shotty before sending it through to be loaded onto the plane. He comes up to me after a few minutes and asks, "This weapon is tested positive for explosive residue." I said, "Like gunpowder?" TSA dude said, "Oh," and hangs his head and walks away. My 5-year-old is mixed ethnicity, doesn't obviously look like me to people not used to seeing mixed kids, and doesn't speak English. So when I took him to the US via San Francisco last time by myself, I was quite seriously interrogated until I finally told them, "It's too bad you don't have any agents who speak Japanese, or you could just ask my son." Of course, I said this while pointing at an agent a few meters away whose name tag read Maruyama. They called her over, and in about 5 seconds it was cleared up. "Hi little boy, what's your name?" Then confirmed with passport, "And who's this?" "Okay, you and your dad have a nice trip." I have a cochlear implant, with a magnet embedded in my skull to hold the device in place. I never go through the metal detectors at airports. I always have the stupid feeling up process. One time I went through and they asked me why I wanted the pat-down. Refraining from smart aleck jokes, I told them it was because of my cochlear implant. They didn't believe me and asked me to take it out to show them. I showed them the external processor. They wanted to see the magnet part, despite my telling them it was under my scalp, placed in a niche in my skull where the bone had been removed. Even viewing the 3-inch scar, they still wanted to know why I couldn't take it off so I could have passed through the detector. It's not wise to challenge or to giggle at times like that. A supervisor came out, asked almost exactly the same questions, received the same answers, and then let me go after the pat-down. It's never happened again, but I must admit it blew my mind. Okay, so this topic is so far a wall-to-wall smearing of the TSA, which is absolutely hilarious, but hopefully we get some variety in soon. What on earth is the hiring process there? Is failing social studies, science, math, and physical education a compulsory criteria to get a job there? While getting hassled in a sobriety checkpoint, the cop asked the driver where he got his license. Our driver responded with, "The DMV." The cop didn't seem to know how to respond. Not a question, my sister's first name is Katie. Just Katie, not Catherine or Kathleen or anything. Just Katie. When my mum picked her up from preschool one day, the teacher said to my mother, "She won't respond to anything other than Katie." And my mum just went, "Yeah, well, that's her name." I'm currently 9 months pregnant and work in a restaurant. I'm very obviously pregnant. My belly is ginormous and the rest of me is small. I was seating this woman and she asked why I was limping. "It's called waddling, lady." I said, "Oh no, I'm not limping, I'm pregnant." She looked at my belly. "Pregnant? I would never have guessed that. How far?" 9 months. "Oh my god, are you going into labor now?" "Not to my knowledge." What the frick, people? At an interview, HR lady asked me to, quote, "Name 5 things you're not." I quipped, Batman, a porcupine, on fire, purple, and bubblegum. She looked confused, made a note, and continued with the interview. I got the job. I work as a receptionist for a lawyer, and there's always a client who demands to speak to my boss even though I've told them already that he isn't in and the time he will be in. "I want to speak to the lawyer. He's in court at the moment, but he'll be here after 2 p.m. Did you want to leave a message or call back?" "No, I want to speak to him now." "Okay, great. I can speak to him?" "No, unfortunately, the lawyer is in court and won't be in the office until after 2 p.m.
You can leave a message or call back after 2 p.m. when he's here.
What's in the bag, ma'am? My groceries? I checked out not 10 feet away from you. Bloody security. I got in a bullcrap accident with a taxi driver who thought lawsuits were part of his income. At the deposition, his lawyer kept asking and aggressively repeating questions that I have to assume trip some people up. His lawyer asked, in a condescending tone, "And why were you going to the library?" I looked right into his eyes and calmly said, "Because I like to read." Deposition over. What is this? He's going through my diabetes kit and found my Lancet cartridges. Really? It's a Lancet to prick my finger for diabetes blood glucose monitoring. I can't let you take this on the aircraft. Sir, that's not an option of yours. TSA policies specifically allow diabetes and other medical testing supplies. Get me your supervisor. We were interrupted by the supervisor ripping the crap out of him. Flat out dismissed him so he can study the policies again, apologized to me, and let me on my way. TSA can be flat out irritating at times, but some of them at least try not to suck. Took a job transfer to another country. I had all of my belongings in a rental truck. Border security. Why are you bringing a lawnmower into the country? Because I own it?
I would have said to periodically reduce the length of grass on my property.
My phone number is 1 digit away from a PNC bank, and I get calls about it once or twice a week. You'd be surprised how many people don't believe me when I try to correct them. The conversation always goes as follows. Hello, PNC? I say, sorry, you have the wrong number, and I give them the right one. That's what I dialed. Are you sure this isn't the PNC? Hold on, let me check. Alright, yes, I just double-checked. I'm in my boxers drinking beer and watching He-Man. I sincerely hope I'm not working in a bank right now. I'd probably lose my job. These phone calls are hilarious, and no, they never believe that they have the wrong number, and they think this is all a prank we're playing with our own livelihoods. I used to have a lot of people mistaking my number for a local restaurant. When I answered, "Hello, my name's speaking, this is not that restaurant," you would hear a few slow seconds of stupid face, followed by, "Is this the restaurant?" Some people really want to will things into existence, I guess. When I was crossing the border from Canada to the States with my cousin, and the Border Patrol guy asked us how we're related, and we told him, and he said, "You guys are cousins but have different last names. Explain that to me." And we just stared at him, and I started laughing. TSA asked me, "Would you do me a favor and type in your password for us?" I said, "No." I'm walking home from a friend's house in my neighborhood one night. As I'm crossing the street, a police officer shines his spotlight on me and says, "Hey kid, why are you crossing the road at this time of night?" And without thinking, the smart aleck me says, "To get to the other side." And with that, I was on my way. About 10 years ago, I worked at a fast food job and I had to wear a name tag, as one does at fast food jobs. A young guy came up to the counter one day, squinted at my name tag and said, "John, is that your name?" "Nah, dude. They just give us these things with random names on them." I tried chatting up a girl at summer camp. I started and ended the conversation with, "So, are you here for camp?" My hair is very, very red, so I often get people who are incredulous as to its hue. However, because I'm pale, freckled, and have red eyebrows, people usually realize it's natural. Once a woman walked up to me, grabbed some of my hair and said, "I love this color. What salon do you go to? I want them to do my hair just like this." I backed away, trying to get her to let go of my hair, and awkwardly said, "No, it's my natural color. No salons for me." The woman then got really close to me and whispered, "No, really, you don't have to lie to me. I know hair doesn't really come in this color, so where do you get it done? I promise I won't tell." Thank you for your story. I loved your work in Brave. I forgot my badge that gets me into work once. For some reason of all times, the head of security, who's an ex-cop, was working there. He asks me, "Why did you forget your badge?" I just stared at him. Since I didn't make a conscious decision to not bring it, I had no idea what to say. Finally, I just said, "I don't know how to answer that question." I lost a textbook in high school once, and the teacher, this lady who has a PhD in literature and wore business suits to teach 9th grade English to green herb smokers, was like, "Why did you lose your book?" and demanded an answer. I was like,
I thought it would be a good career move. She explained to me that it wasn't. I was in a deposition related to a car accident. The lawyer asked me which car struck the other first. I turned to my lawyer and said, "Is she serious?" Later in the same deposition, I was asked, what color was the green light? I did not care for that attorney. Wouldn't you rather be deposed by a stupid attorney than by a smart attorney? Once the TSA frisked my ponytail because it was, and I quote, too curly. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I suffered from a collapsed lung earlier this year, and shortly after, I was released from hospital, and a small party was thrown to celebrate me getting home after 26 days in hospital. A girl came up to me and asked, "So, can you, still breathe?" I said, "Of course not." I have a unique name, so this happens a lot. The question is, where did you get that name? From my parents. Almost 20 years ago, I sprained my ankle pretty bad and was taken to the hospital. The next day, a health insurance drone calls our house, wanting a very detailed account of how I got hurt. Her question was, and I quote word by word, "Now tell us, did you sprain your ankle first and then go to the hospital to x-ray your foot? Or did you go to the hospital for x-rays first and then sprain your ankle? Lady, are you freaking stupid or do you just like to pretend that you are?" I was once stopped at the Canadian-American border heading into Canada and was asked if I was carrying anything besides clothes into Canada. I replied, I've got a fifth of vodka in the back." Her next question was, "Do you have any alcohol or tobacco?" I have some vodka in the back." Look, I'm sure that there are perfectly smart border and airline security out there. I'm so sorry that this video is slandering the entire profession. This was not the purpose the narrator set out on. But my gosh, the good security staff out there must have some really interesting stories of their brain-dead colleagues trying to do basic tasks like prepare lunch and burning down the kitchen. Airport security officer asked me what the purpose of the metal wiring on my teeth served, which was a retainer. I told him it was so I could look beautiful. I was once pulled over on the highway for speeding. When the cop asked, "Do you know how fast you were going back there?" I didn't know, so I stared at my dash for a second, then finally answered, "Too fast?" The cop laughed and set me free with a warning. Victory. I once had the police call on me at college for juggling torches. The cop asked me what I was doing, and his next question was, "Why are you doing it outside?" I was at the Canada-US border, between Queenston and Lewiston, on my way to the War of 1812 reenactment at Fort Niagara, New York. I have a cooler in the back seat, a wooden box with a regular plastic cooler inside. It was empty at the time. The border guard asked, "Do you have any firearms or explosives in the cooler?" I said, "No, not in the cooler." "Okay, have a good trip." I did have 2 flintlock muskets and roughly 2 pounds of rifle powder in the trunk, which is why I added "not in the cooler." Another time, same reason and same border crossing, I was crossing with my cousin and they asked us about weapons again. We told them there's 5 flintlocks in the trunk and 4 pounds of rifle powder. The border guard doesn't really care about that, but asks 100 questions about the 9 6-foot wooden tent poles in the car. This one really confused me since it was September 21st, 2001, 10 days after the September 11th incident, and they're more worried about the tent poles than the pounds of explosive powder. I work at Dunkin' Donuts. Customer ordered a large coffee with cream and a medium black. When I handed them to him, he asked, "Which one is which?" I said, "The large one is the large." "If I buy this MacBook today, what will you give me?" A MacBook?" TSA, while looking at our tickets, says to my brother, "Age." My brother had recently had a birthday. So he says, 14. No, 15. There was a pause, and then he said, "It changes every darn year." While working on my MA in clinical psychology, I attended a case conference class where we, as student therapists, would discuss our therapy clients over the last week. A young, naive, rich female student described an incident at the ER of the hospital where she worked. A man came in on a gurney that had been shot. I asked him how he felt and he said,
How do you think I feel, you stupid witch? I've been shot 6 times.
You know, I really learned a lot that day. My neighbor asked me why I'd been at the system on a Tuesday, like it makes any difference what time punkt I buy my alcohol. Besides, it's augusti. Never heard talas om en nubbe på kräftskivan?
When I was in basic training with the army, our drill instructors would say, "Why is the sky blue?" The response we were supposed to give was, "Because God loves the infantry." Infantry color is blue in the US military. The first time my drill sergeant asked me this, I looked at him like he was an idiot and started going off about blue light refracting off the Earth's atmosphere. I used to ride a motorcycle. I used it to commute to work every day for several years. I'd be wearing my riding jacket and pants, boots, and holding my helmet, and someone would invariably ask, "So, you ride a motorcycle?" My standard reply became, "No, I just fall down a lot." TSA was looking at my ID. "Is this you?" Naturally, I say, "No, it's my evil twin." They give me a dirty look. "Please step aside over here, sir." Internally, I'm going, why God? This happened 2 months ago coming back from Florida. I had to stay back and answer 15 minutes worth of questions in order to prove that I'm not an enemy of America. I got into a car crash.
Did you die?
My twin sister was pulled by the TSA for having, quote, too many zippers on her pants. She was wearing cargo pants and had a total of 3 different zippers. What the frick, TSA? A cop pulled me over for doing 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. Trying to come up with a witty line, he said, "Let me see your pilot's license." So I took out my wallet and produced my pilot's license. He let me go. Did he decide that you were in fact actually an aerial vehicle on an approved low pass over the highway? Did you destroy that poor policeman's reality? Walking through a Sam's Club, and the window installer guy comes up to me and goes, "Sir, how are your windows?" And I simply reply, "Oh, they're great, I can see right through them." At a fast food restaurant the other day, the cashier asks, "What would you like?" I say, "A sandwich and tea." "Anything else?" "Just the sandwich and tea." "Would you like anything to drink?" "Just the tea." I'm 23 and Australian. I travel on my own a fair amount. I arrived in the US and started going through customs when I was pulled off into a separate room. After they'd gone through everything, notebooks, texts, washing powder, he looked so very excited about the washing powder. He asked how I could afford to travel and take time off work. I passed or whatever. After they gave me back my passport, I asked what the heck it was all about. They said, "You're a young female traveler. You might have been trying to get a job here." "Have you seen your economy?" He had no response to that. My tourist friend on their first day in New York goes up to the MTA employee at the desk. "Excuse me, what stop do I get off the subway to get to Grand Central?" "Grand Central." My dad told me a story when himself and his friends were out drinking underage one night and an officer had caught them. He grabbed a beer bottle that was thrown in the woods next to their car and said, "So, if I take this bottle down to the station, whose fingerprints am I going to find on it?" And my dad said, "Yours now, dummy." Customer says, "If you replace my broken air conditioner, will the new one cool my house?" I said, "If you turn down the thermostat." High school teacher here, one of my students asked, "Mr. Johnson, I checked the grades website and it currently said I have an 88. I'm wondering how far away I am from getting a 90. I said, "You're 2% away." I was answering as a joke while planning to follow up with a discussion of what skills she needs to work on to push through to an A. She says, "Okay, thanks." And then they just frickin' walked out before I could continue. Upon telling people my name, which is a short and unusual name in North America, people often ask me if it's short for anything. The answer is no. They always ask, "Are you sure?" And I glare at them a while, and when that doesn't sink in, "Oh, you're absolutely right. I totally forgot my name is short for," and I make up a bunch of random words. I once was asked the following by a girl who's definitely smart enough to know better while I was standing in front of her. "How was that competition you went to in Wisconsin? Wait, is it still going on? Are you still there?" When I was in recruit training for the US Marine Corps, our squad bay was on the first deck, or floor. One time, someone on a higher deck dropped a bag of trash out the window and some recruits saw it land on the ground and decided to tell the drill instructor about it. "Sir, this recruit just saw a crap bag fall from the second deck, sir." "By crap bag, do you mean recruit?" As a former US Army interrogator, I can say that part of our training is to make as few assumptions as possible in our questioning. I'll admit that asking the intention of eyeglasses sounds a little overboard, but some of the questions we were required to ask might make the person want to say, "Duh, isn't it self-evident?" I run into someone I know at the supermarket, and they always say, "Oh, hey, what are you doing here?"
"Oh, just hunting elephants." "Excuse me, are there nuts in the butter pecan ice cream?"
Also, "Do you sell ice cream here?" after walking past the ice cream case and staring at the menu for a good 5 seconds. I was once at the DMV, and the lady asked me if I wore glasses while I was wearing my glasses. This is a legitimate question, though. I was asked the same thing while wearing glasses, about to take my picture for my license. I just kind of laughed and asked her, is she required to ask that question? She said yes, because people come in with glasses that aren't prescription, and if they mark that the lenses are required and they're really not, if the person gets pulled over, an officer can write a ticket for not wearing prescription lenses. Some jerk cop pulled me over thinking that I was drunk, noticed my bottle of water in the back seat. He angrily asks me, "What's in that bottle?" "Water." "Why the hell do you carry a bottle of water in your car?" "For drinking." Yada yada yada. Back in high school, I'd gone about 3 days without sleep and was in the principal's office for skipping class, and I was sitting on the chair in front of him, dozing off, generally looking messed up. He said, hardly sincerely, "Are you on something?" I looked at him puzzled for a second and thought of it, so I said, "Yep, a chair." He never liked me. My friend Bonnie is always asked what her name is short for. She answers Bonniesaurus Rex. Rawr. Scientists. What mad supervillain experiment do you actually want to conduct in real life? I want to do a long-term case study on children's microbiome. It would start off with samples of their mother's microbiome, and then when the child is first born, get a sample of theirs, compare it, and continue comparing the two samples throughout chest feeding versus bottle feeding. Also, get a detailed comparison of how the microbiome changes after vaccinations, sickness, and antibiotics. I would basically study every single number 2 this child has, their eating habits, their health conditions, any medications and vaccinations for years. But people want privacy, and most wouldn't want to commit to keeping such accurate accounts of their children's food, health, and activities. So it's likely that even if I did this study, it would be difficult to prove all variables were accounted for. And with all the variability, I would need many, many children. The end goal is to see how our microbiome changes throughout your childhood, and note when you may be more susceptible to things depending on the type of microflora you have. Everyone has a different ratio, so essentially, if we can harness the individual's capability of unique flora, we could find a whole new way to tackle illnesses and preventatives for sicknesses that would have significantly less side effects than many other medications. This idea stems from others studying the microbiome and finding that certain ratios of microflora can cause you to get over illnesses quicker when combined with the right medicine, and also help digestive tracts regulate better. But so far, these tests are being done with cancer patients. I think if we're able to see how children are affected, it may bring less possibilities of terminal illness and other illnesses down the road, as well as a faster recovery. And everyone is telling me to have a kid or become a nanny and collect the number 2? No, the point of this study is that it needs to include thousands of participants. I want to take DNA from infamous serial unalivers like Jeffrey Dahmer or Albert Fish or the like and clone them, then have the baby raised in a normal, supportive, loving family. I'd study the kids all through adulthood to see how much is nurture and how much is nature. I experiment on ancient coins. Museums are generally against me doing a full compositional analysis that would involve me dissolving the whole coin in acid, but it sure would tell us a lot more than not. As a student of history, I can confirm that just about every person in my field would have had massive issues with this. However, I'm not sure that the results would lead to any true mad scientist outcome, just a bunch of crying museum custodians and a slightly better idea of the composition of ancient coins. I'm a physician, and I would love to see how far the placebo effect really goes. For those who aren't familiar, the placebo effect is an unexplained phenomena where people who take medications that aren't real but believe they're real have an actual measurable effect on their illness. People with depression who take sugar pills report feeling happier. People with pain who take sugar pills report a decrease to their pain, among other things. I've seen even crazier ones where people think they're having surgery for their bad knee, but the docs just put them under, make an incision on their knee, do nothing, sew them back up, and patients report improvement to their bad knee. So part of me just wants to explore this crap to its full extent. Can we treat chronic illnesses like arthritis, lupus, and bipolar disorder with just placebos? Can you imagine if someone's human immunodeficiency virus viral load decreased while they were eating Skittles and thinking it's a new miracle drug? But it's pretty much just fantasy. You'd have to take two groups of the same disease's positive individuals, give one real medicine and the other one Skittles, and this is profoundly unethical. For those of you who are saying that's how clinical trials work, the answer is not really. According to Article 11.3 of the Declaration of Helsinki, which is the ethical guidance of clinicians overseeing clinical trials, it's unethical to use placebo arms if there exists a proven medication for the condition. If you're testing a new drug on your control group, it's whatever the best treatment available on the market is, not a placebo. It's very rare that a disease or condition has no effective treatments out there that would justify the use of a placebo to measure clinical effectiveness. In my human immunodeficiency virus example, this is obviously not plausible. We have meds that lower that particular disease's viral load already. I would like to clone myself. Nature versus nurture. Sorry dude, you can have as many kids as possible with one woman, but you can't clone yourself. I can't even do it once. Identical twins is totally fine also. Experiments with social isolation intrigue me. Raise a child with no language and see what happens. No contact. Wild children give us some insights, but also a sample of the kind of trauma this can produce. Completely and undeniably unethical, incredibly cruel, but so intriguing. This has already been done and documented in the past. There was this king who believed that children raised in complete isolation would naturally speak Greek. So to test this, he ordered a group of babies to be placed in isolation from adults. And a few times per day, midwives would feed or clean them, and the result of this experiment was that every single baby died, even though they were being fed. This reminds me of the chicken boy. The poor child was locked in a chicken coop for the first few years of his life, and as such, he thought he was a chicken. Absolutely tragic, but still fascinating. I want to work on genetically modifying the genes that control our active cones in our eyes. Specifically, I want to try to activate a tertiary cone in the eyes of dogs so that they can see infrared light just like snakes can. In simpler terms, we could make rescue dogs that have infrared vision to help locate missing people or recover people in natural disasters. In even simpler terms than that, I want to make heat-seeking dogs. I want a substance-heavy Olympics where everyone is using something to enhance their performance, to see the true limit of humans. Now, I wouldn't say mad scientist, but medical privacy laws get in the way of a lot of incredibly useful research. Everything has to be so de-identified and confidential that it makes doing any sort of large-scale statistics nearly impossible. You have to make a ton of assumptions because you can't know many details. If I had full access to everyone's medical records, we would probably fix a whole lot of crap. Yeah, I have to admit, it is fascinating to listen to our actual medical and science PhD people talk about the possibilities we could unlock if all ethics were removed. On the other hand, I can see why we can't do these experiments. Take the following one, for example. I'd want to know how long it would take a group of children raised to puberty to figure out about doing the deed. I'm sure they'd figure out pickle and bean tickling on some level, but how long would it take them to figure out tab A into slot B? The subjects could be raised about as normal as possible, but with any mentioning of reproduction and copulation completely removed. And there would be no shame or deterrent while they figure it out. Like the caretakers wouldn't tell them, "We don't do that," if they found out one was whacking the mule, or that two consenting teenagers were touching each other. There would be some kind of explanation with trying to encourage that kind of stuff in private instead of around the others. I'm just curious about how our urge to merge is kind of instinctual in other animals. It doesn't really seem that way with us. We learn from so many different sources nowadays that we don't need to figure it out ourselves. We have the internet, friends and peers, maybe parents, books, TV, and possibly life skills classes in school. What would it be like if we just didn't teach or explain or acknowledge it and see how long it took them to figure it out themselves? There have been documented stories where virgin couples have gone to see a doctor because they couldn't get preggers, and it's been discovered that all they've been doing is lying in bed together and waiting for something to happen. I also read a story once where the guy was inserting his eggplant into the wrong place. Like geographically, he was way off. The typical discovery and clinical testing pipeline of a pharmaceutical process looks something like this. Cell culture, to rodent models, to other animals like primates or rabbits, to humans. If at any step the substance fails the test, either for toxicity or efficacy, the potential medication is nixed, and this process of discovery and clinical testing can take up to 10 years at the cost of billions of dollars. What happens if your model systems can't fully recapitulate the human disease phenotype? So what happens is you've got a medicine that might work really well in the human, but we never know because it gets trashed because there's no response in the house model. Now, I completely understand the ethical concerns with testing on human subjects from the get-go, but if you ask me to don my mad scientist lab coat and goggles, I'd try to push for earlier testing on human subjects. Use the milk from orb spiders to build a better dental filling. By the way, they mix the DNA of spiders with goats at University of Wyoming. From my understanding, these fillings would hypothetically last exponentially longer, would bond to teeth as an organic substance, and are stronger than Teflon. It would also be minimally invasive as to set the groundwork for more invasive medical applications, such as knee replacements. If you fund me, I know the orb goat and dental guys. Identical twins have very similar DNA. If raised exactly the same way without interaction with each other, would they make the same choices? There have been studies done where separated twins chose the same career, marry a woman by the same name, and maybe even call their kids by the same names. It was crazily specific. This actually was a pretty horrifying experiment in the US in the 60s, where they purposefully split twins and adopted them out to separate parents to study them. The documentary 3 Identical Strangers is about it, and really interesting. I'd never do the experiment, but it's hard to overstate how helpful it would be to have large-scale, longitudinal data on how different chemotherapeutic meds and med cocktails affect the evolutionary trajectory of tumors. The problem is that in order to study it, you'd need to 1. Give a large number of people experimental or substandard care, which is highly unethical, and 2. Perform serial surgeries even when they aren't medically necessary, in order to collect tissue samples from the tumors. And since every surgery carries with it some risks, this is also highly unethical. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I would really love to have a hunk of plutonium in the attic above my bedroom. I mean, the right amount would have to be sussed out first, of course. They found out that some buildings in Japan had been made with irradiated steel from stockyards near the blast zones of either Hiroshima or Nagasaki, and the people that lived in them had abnormally long and cancer-free lives, presumably because, there's a scientific term for it where your body comes into some kind of homeostasis with snake venom over long enough exposure to small doses. They think that's what happened with those people and the radiation as well. Their bodies adapted to it and became far less prone to having the big C disease because of it. Also, it would lower my heating bill in the winter. Plus, I really wish we could just use molten salt reactors as well. Honestly, I think the government should give them away to property owners, as it would benefit the United States greatly to have a populace of people off the power grid, powering themselves independently and greenly, with a stable power source that'll last more than 100 years for their needs, all while depleting our vast nuclear waste reserves. The economy would benefit, people would be more able to afford housing, and emissions would go down. Again, this is a very interesting idea that could benefit a lot of the human race as a whole, assuming that it goes perfectly to plan and nobody uses the abundance of available radioactive material that would result from it for their own nefarious needs. And we all know that if people can do something bad for their own personal benefit, they would. It's interesting to hear about, though. I'm a chemist, and the answer is anything. Biophysicist here, I would love to investigate CRISPR technology in vivo cancer patients, using the technology to block cleavage from occurring at specific DNA sites. I've studied this in vitro, but experimenting in a live human being could be risky waters. Electrostimulation as a means of regrowing limbs sounds pretty interesting, and I'd love to see the effects on humans. If I recall correctly, one of the problems with this is that the wound site must be kept fresh, and humans bleed out too damn quickly if their wounds aren't able to clot, which would interrupt the growth. Animal and human hybrids. Transferring consciousness to a computer so we can live forever. Or reproductive cloning so everyone can have their own organs for transplantation. I mentioned this in stem cell class one day, and I've been the weird girl ever since. Just having organs or the whole body intact, practically alive but only kept around to service your needs when you need it? If you could clone a whole human body that came to life and interacted in daily life, would it still be your spare organ farm or a whole new human? There's also the problem of the body and organs having the same predisposition you do, so what if your heart that you'd cloned had the same defaults as your now failing heart? I'd love to study language development, like sticking a bunch of babies on a remote island without outside influence and document how they learn to communicate. I want to create miniature elephants. Through ingenious genetic manipulation, I'll be able to miniaturize any living animal. And yeah, I know there's a South Park reference, and also a Jurassic Park the book reference. Mostly, I want a cuddly mini plant that I can socialize as a lovely companion, all while spiking municipal water supplies to shrink the general population and go Godzilla on their butts. That's what you get for making fun of my homemade pie, Karen. I'm an infosec guy. Do security researchers count as scientists yet? And I'd love to do social engineering experiments, but they're either illegal or immoral. I'd like to raise babies in various planned conditions, such as without any adult human interaction, without language, indoors only, with different concepts of a family unit, with different concepts of gender roles, and many, many more. Stem cells. Screw morals. Frick where the cells come from, and frick religious objections. Can I fix a person who had a stroke and has half their body paralyzed? In the immortal words of Peter Griffin, why are we not funding this? Transhumanism. I want to see a heavier push towards prosthesis and the like. I have a healthy interest in immortality. We're already seeing huge advancements in prosthetics, biohacking, and extended lifespans. I'm happy to say that out of all of the things in the video up to this point, this one is actually coming along quite well. And it's been around for a very long time when you consider old-timey dental work, hearing aids, pacemakers, among other things. It's not even a question of how, only when. However, considering the insecure nature of most portable devices, IoT in general, the good will come with an unhealthy amount of bad. Say, that's a really nice, super strong prosthetic arm you've got there. It would be a shame if it went all idle hands on you. The narrator finds the prospect of transhumanism oddly terrifying, despite the fact that people would presumably be free to opt out of immortality. There is something highly unnerving to me where we can just choose to not die. I can't put my finger on why, it's a myriad of reasons. Mostly I feel like our brains would continue to degrade despite how much we slow that process, meaning we end up with a bunch of dementia-ridden cyborgs incapable of governing ourselves in the end until we all just break down. Serious answer. I'd take about 1 billion people, lock them into a completely contained living space for their entire lives, and actually science the crap out of what people eat and what their reaction is to what they eat. I would measure every single molecule that goes in and every single molecule that goes out. Measure their weight, their level of hunger, the level of physical activity, everything. What they breathe in, what they breathe out. Number 1, number 2, measure every excretion. We'd know exactly if broccoli is good or if cigarettes are bad or if you should eat eggs. This is obviously impossible and cruel, inhumane, and I would never even suggest it, but at least we'd know if we should eat eggs for breakfast or not. Grafting artificial muscles, even though I don't have any qualifications and stuff. I wouldn't be perceived as a mad scientist, just a profligate researcher. I'd be castigated and my professional reputation would be irrevocably altered, but I'd like to establish the UK's first body farm so we can replicate University of Tennessee's facility to meticulously research human decomposition. Ostensibly, I'd be indulging my personal predilection for prestige, as the justification for a body farm isn't compelling for some entomologists. It's a vanity project in their opinion. Others condemn the idea as a frivolous tourist attraction. People are amenable to donate, we just have nowhere to put them. I work mainly with snake venom, but my friend called me and told me his brother-in-law knows a guy that harvests scorpion venom. It's prohibitively expensive normally, but this guy insisted you didn't have to go through the normal process of acquiring it. So I'm imagining a sweatshop situation with various containers of scorpion venom. I feel like buying and possessing an old milk jug of scorpion juice would at least make me seem mad, to say the least. You'd be a rich mad lad though. Doesn't scorpion venom go for about $40 million per gallon? Use targeted injections of virally encoded opsins, like channel rhodopsins, and some simple signal-to-light converters to get ESP. See into the UV or far red? Sure, why not? Take in Wi-Fi-based data or EMF data? Cool, let's do it. Anything you can build a detector for, if reasonably small, you could then encode in some area of your brain. You could also swap in and out the detector as needed. Going into the dark? Let's go for some infrared. Going for a hike in the woods? How about some inbuilt GPS? I'm left-handed and I've always heard lefties are right-brained or creative and righties are left-brained or logical. I'd like to create a school, pre-kindergarten to 12th grade, that includes boarding where the only difference is that everything inside the school, door handles, computer mouses, sports equipment and scissors, are accommodated for left-handed people. The teachers would all be left-handed as well, but the students will be the usual mix of 90% right-handed and 10% left-handed. Would right-handed kids in this environment use their right brain more because they're forced to be more creative? Would the left-handed kids become more right-brained? Biologist here, and I want to develop an artificial system to grow a baby outside of the womb. The initial tests would involve a donor uterus, likely from a pig or a primate unless we can get a healthy one from a human hysterectomy, which would be connected to an artificial blood supply. This blood supply would be circulated through the 37C incubator using a pump to mimic the heartbeat. As the embryo develops, different chemicals will be pumped into the bloodstream to maintain appropriate levels of HCG, estrogen, progesterone, oxygen, and nutrients. I'd also need to develop a way to efficiently filter out waste. If we could robotize this process, you could leave it running for 9 months and get a fully developed baby without destroying your body. This would also eliminate things like fetal alcohol syndrome and other negative effects of poor diet or substance use during pregnancy. Of course, having said all that, it's highly unethical to test on humans and probably shouldn't be done. Also, very difficult to get all the chemicals and blood compositions right. Astronomer here. I would really love to get a hunk of a neutron star and bring it back to Earth and study it. Neutron stars are, as the name implies, essentially a ball of neutrons, where the amount of mass in the sun is squeezed into the size of a city. This means they're extremely dense, well beyond the labs on Earth, thus we don't know much about their properties and how they work. For example, a small fraction of neutron stars give off a beam of radio radiation, which we see as it roars around. So we call them pulsars. What actually gives off the radio beam in the first place? No one really knows. It probably has something to do with magnetic fields in a young neutron star, and we've found a class called magnetars where the magnetic field would kill you if you got within 1,000 kilometers of one. But yeah, no one has a clue how those magnetic fields get so strong either. So in conclusion, if anyone has an idea on how to get me some rocket tech to visit one in an evening, 60s cartoon villain style, let me know because I'm gonna go get a neutron star. Self-cloning. I want to know if I have a better chance at life if my double or clone is raised by a person who cares, instead of by the awful people who gave my start a huge disadvantage, to put it mildly. No, I'm not blaming them, or even if I am, it's still my job to take care of myself no matter what happened in the past. A person with my IQ and capabilities should be so much more successful instead of gradually having to make it up to zero, to emerge from a black hole of anxiety, self-doubt, and trying to make it as a loner. I want to see what happens with my generous intellectual and creative gifts if I were to actually nurture and mentor myself. Well, I'm just a student studying IT, but I'm still really interested in speciation and evolution. I remember watching a documentary about Hiroshima, I think, and how the insects have went through about 40 generations, so they've adapted to the point where they can filter out radiation, but the horses in the area are filled with it because they haven't had much generations in the radiation. So basically, I want to introduce mice, mainly because they reproduce quickly, into different environments that slowly become harsher and harsher in an attempt to make them evolve. Like, I want to make them completely aquatic, where they no longer need land and are able to live off only seaweed, or where their back legs basically become like a kangaroo that can jump really high to get around. Idiots of the internet, what is the stupidest thing you've done? Responded to my own Craigslist ad looking for a roommate. I literally thought, oh, she sounds cool, and only realized after I received the email from myself. I was riding my bike and wondered what would happen if I stuck my feet in the spokes of my front tire. The answer? Flipped over the handlebars, broke my 2 front teeth, and I got road rash on half my face. Late for work, running around the house looking for my keys. Ran upstairs, saw them on the desk, pointed at them and said to the air, "There they are!" I was nearly back at the front door when I realized I hadn't actually picked them up. I got pretty wasted on tranquilizers and booze. That would already be stupid enough, but my sauced-up brain had bigger plans. Being done with my bender, I decided to go home by public bus, which I'd just missed and could see driving down the road. So I did exactly what would be the reasonable and responsible thing to do. I flagged down the cop car that was approaching and asked him to pull over the bus. He asked if I'd been drinking, so I said, yes, that's why I'm taking the bus home instead of driving. He said he'd give me a lift and I got in. I have no recollection of what happened until the next day, but my mum told me a very nice police officer dropped me off at home and I'd drooled all over his back seat. I work as a substitute middle school teacher. At the beginning of each day, the kids listen to the announcements. One time, they announced that one of the students who'd been battling a terminal illness passed away the night before. So me, being the great guy that I am, decided to give the students 5 minutes of time to sit quietly and reflect. Then I decided to lighten the mood by calling attendance, so I used bizarre inflection to entertain the students. I called out, "Tyler?" No response. Called it out again, no response. Finally, one student piped up and said that was the kid that we'd just had a 5-minute silence for. This was after I'd called out his name several times with differing tones of voice to be comical, while all the students saw was me bashing the dead kid. Frick. Oh boy, all of these so far, apart from the tranquilizer one, are things that the narrator could imagine themselves doing. But this final one especially. Well-meaning joke to get the poor kids to smile turns into a horrible, disrespectful moment. Well done. In a spelling bee, I spelled the word Python Python. I was quickly reminded that eth is not a letter, though to this day I think that maybe it should be. I woke up one night, I saw a hand on my pillow, started to freak out, froze, waited, decided I'd move, screamed and jumped when the hand moved. It was my hand. I once fell asleep with my hand above my head, so it fell completely asleep. In the middle of the night, a hand flopped onto my chest, completely numb. So I woke up with a hand on my chest that I couldn't feel. Scared the crap out of me. I turned left onto a one-way street, where I should have gone right. That wasn't so bad until I panicked and then did a U-turn around the median onto yet another one-way street. Still going the wrong way. Enter my first and only car accident. I tooted one time when I was little. I thought, how can I get my bum to stop smelling so bad? My solution? Spray air freshener up my butt. I spent the next couple of minutes writhing in pain with a burning booty hole. I stapled my finger to see if stapling my finger was possible. Can confirm, it is. I let my friend shoot me with a blowgun dart we bought at the flea market. It hurt a lot at first, but then Bautista won the Royal Rumble on PPV an hour later and everything went numb. And 3 days later, our video of me being shot with it was featured on The Soup. One time I went through the drive-thru at Dunkin' Donuts and stopped at the trash can instead of the speaker for about 5 to 8 minutes, repeatedly saying, "Hello? I work in fast food, answering in drive-thru a lot of the time, and you just made me laugh so hard. Thanks." I have a theory that people switch over to their reserve brain or something when they get to a drive-thru speaker box. They just do and say weird things. Went back to a girl's house after dinner. She had early class the next day, so gets ready for bed, but says I can stay and keep her company for a while. Laying in her bed, she's in silk pajamas, I'm fully clothed. We're just talking, and I start running my hand up and down her back. She says, you'd better stop that, I'm getting turned on. So I stopped, like a fricking idiot. I hole-punched my hair, thinking that I'd get a perfect little circle all surrounded by hair. I was so shocked when it cut my hair, and I just couldn't understand why for far too long of a time. I put an umbrella handle in my mouth and pushed the button to release the umbrella. I thought the umbrella would shoot out the front of my mouth and open. Instead, the handle extended back into my mouth and broke my front teeth. No idea why I thought that. I was 11 and I thought for about 5 months I'd invited the act of flicking the bean and even told my friends about it. That ended up being my 5 months of fame. PE in high school. We did quite a bit of rope climbing and it felt great. I didn't really know what was going on, but I absolutely loved rope climbing. I used to be too scared to go on the roof of the gym, but when things started feeling good, I'd climb like there was no tomorrow. I asked some of my classmates if they felt the same way, but never got a straight answer out of them. I had the same thing, only with a pole that stood on the playground, so basically I was a pole dancer at the age of 10. I clicked on an adult video link at work, thinking that if I closed the window really fast, the system wouldn't know. I mean, that kinda works. You were looking at adult material? No, sir, it was one of those stupid pop-up ads. Got me right when I clicked. I closed it immediately, you can see it in the system. If I was actually looking at that material, wouldn't you see a lot more connections made just beyond the one? And then they check the records and it shows you're right. When I was younger, I got kicked out of ballet class because I kept running into the mirrors thinking they were open windows or like portals to another world or something. Last weekend, my friend asked for a ride across town since he left his phone at a bar the previous night. Somehow I heard car instead of phone, so I dropped him off and drove home. I don't answer calls while I'm driving since I'm a bad driver too, so I didn't realize I missed 3 of his calls until I got home. I'm sure there's others, but my memory's going pretty fast as well. Not me, but a friend of mine was dead serious and asked, why don't wheelchairs have pedals for when your arms get tired? A friend came to my house, knocked on my door. When I answered it, I was greeted with, "Hey, are you home?" The narrator hopes that the answer was a stern no, followed by you slamming the door on their face and just waiting to see what they did next. Namely, I'm interested in if they believed you and went home. Missed the school bus and potential rides to school one morning because I couldn't find my backpack. Eventually, realized it was on my back. I asked my wife, who was upstairs, to drop my phone down to me. As it was falling, I thought it would be cool to catch a phone with one finger. It wasn't cool. When my girlfriend asked why I was always late when going to her place, my response was, I'm only late for things that aren't important. I was going number 2 once while browsing Reddit. I wiped my butt with the other hand, stood up and threw my phone in the toilet. I just stood there and said, what the frick? And looked at my duty-covered toilet paper. One of my exes and I met in the city. We always went on dates in the city and never close to where we lived. I'd just moved to the area. I'd heard of the place he lived in, but I didn't think it was close to where I lived and never really thought about it. Then I started staying over at his place, and when I was going home the following afternoons, I'd take the tram into the city center for 20 minutes and then the bus to get to my house, another 40 minutes. I honestly thought the village he lived in was far from my house, so I took the route I knew. Turns out he lives a 10-minute walk away. I did this like 8 times. When I was a kid, I had this genius idea. People are in wheelchairs because they can't lift their legs to walk, right? So what if you tied a length of string around your knee, held on to the other end, and marched yourself around like a puppet? I even named my genius invention. I called it leg reins. It never occurred to me that if you were paralyzed, you wouldn't be able to balance. It also didn't occur to me that I wasn't actually lifting my legs with my arms, I was doing it with my legs. I somehow didn't realize that the reason my dad got me to demonstrate my idea to everyone he knew, one after another whenever someone came over, was not because he was proud of the towering intellect his son possessed. I once started talking crap about a friend who I'd forgotten we'd just picked up and was sitting in the back seat of the car. This one still keeps me up at night. At a job I worked long ago, the crew boss had forgotten he had agreed to give Dave a ride home that night. We cut lawns at various places, and Dave wasn't so good at it. We drove past one of those places on the way home, and my boss started ranting. "Fricking Dave, he missed half that lawn. It looks like crap. That guy is dumb as a rock." Dave quietly spoke up from the back seat. "I'm trying my best." It was pretty quiet for the rest of the ride home. Similar story, but a friend of mine was talking about a girl he was trying to do the deed with that night. And yeah, she was sitting in the back seat and heard the entire thing. It was horrifying for everyone involved. I tied a couch behind a truck with tow straps. I rode on the couch down a gravel road. I smelled burning as the couch legs began to catch fire from friction. The couch leg catches in a pothole and bucks me 5 feet into the air. I have a brief moment of immediate regret. I spend next week sitting very carefully as my butt no longer had any skin on it. The barber, while cutting my hair, asks, "What do you do for a living?" And I replied, "I'm an accountant. You?" This happens in movie theaters and airports all the time. "Enjoy the show." "You too." "Have a good flight." "You too." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had the squirts at the beach from eating seafood, and still decided to go on a long walk. I ended up stranded and found a log facing the beach to sit on and surreptitiously go number 2. I covered everything in the big sandbox as it were, pulled up my bikini bottoms and felt relief, only to stand up and realize that there was an entire family sitting on their beach house deck behind me. They saw everything. Unable to find my phone, in a complete state of panic, I sent my friend a text asking, "Dude, did I leave my phone at your place? I can't find it anywhere." And he replied, "What are you using to send this text, genius?" I have never in my life been so ashamed. I once lost my phone, so I used my phone's light to search for it. I was in a bus, school trip. I even turned the phone back on when it locked the screen. Good times. The best part is I even asked a friend to help me while I pointed the light to his face. One time I tried to pass wind while playing online poker really late while my girlfriend was asleep. About half of the toot came out before I realized more was on its way out too. I caught that before it was too late and jumped up and started to run to the bathroom. I had headphones on and I yanked my head to the left and pulled my PC over as I kicked a 25-pound weight on the floor, broke my toe, and then crapped all over myself. If this doesn't convince people to buy wireless headsets, I don't know what will. Listen, some of us need really high-quality wired headsets for our gaming or our jobs processing and monitoring vast amounts of audio files. That said, this failure is spectacular. One of those times where the transition to 30 seconds before, happily playing your PC, to the present in pain, with a balked computer and covered in your own feces, just seems so impressive. The girl of my dreams came back to my place after dinner and drinks. We had been friends for a long time, but never a hint of anything more. I was in a sleeping bag on the floor. She told me, "Hey, you can jump up and under the quilt to get warm." And my response was, "Oh, the sleeping bag is really warm." It wasn't until the next day that I realized what I'd done. Wow, thinking about this makes me really depressed. That reminds me of something like that happening to me. I was sitting on the couch with this girl I knew, watching a movie. In the middle of it, she lays down and keeps trying to get comfortable and inching her way towards me. I finally noticed and said I'd get her a pillow and set her up a nice little spot on the other side of the couch. I'm so dumb. I once walked right into a road sign. I passed away and woke up in an alley. For real. When I was younger, I went on a date. Things started to get hot and heavy, so she grabbed my hand and put it up her skirt. I didn't know what to do down there, so I just cupped her hoo-ha for an hour. I once thought it would be a good idea to take 3 hits of a hallucinogenic substance and go to my cousin's middle school dance recital. It wasn't a good idea. It was a bad idea. It was a very fricking bad idea. Mine was one of those moments of true stupidity. I was finishing on the John and about to go to bed. I stood up and flushed. As I did, I thought I heard something plop into the bowl. I instantly reached in and, to my delight, grabbed the first thing I felt in my hand. I came up with a turd. I have two. The first is the time I ended up in the hospital because of pasta. One night I was doing dishes that I'd left out for about a week. You know, uni life. And there was a piece of pasta heavily crusted into the bottom of the pot. I couldn't get it off with a sponge or with the brush I was using, so I tried to pick it off with my nails. I managed to pick a little bit too hard, and boom, the pasta shard is under my thumbnail up to about the halfway point. About 10 seconds later, my finger was dripping blood and I realized that the pasta was actually getting cooked by my blood, and visions of awful infections started to run through my head. I decided to play it safe and go to the ER, and the doctor that ended up seeing me 3 hours later told me that I'd made the right choice coming in, which made me feel a little bit better. A couple of scalpels, some surgical scissors, and 30 minutes of excruciating pasta extraction later, I walked out of the hospital missing half of my thumbnail. It hurt like an absolute witch for the next week. I was told that I was the only pasta-related injury any of the doctors in the hospital at the moment had ever seen. The second time is the time I literally tried to be a helicopter and broke my wrist. I was 4 years old and on a field trip with my kindergarten class. It was lunchtime and we were all sitting on a jungle gym eating our lunches. For whatever reason, I decided it was a good idea to stop eating my lunch and walk to the top of the jungle gym so I could jump off. Don't ask me to explain it, it's been 17 years and I'm still amazed at my own inexplicable stupidity. I'm fortunate not to have won a Darwin Award so far. I'd recently learned what a hechelopter was, and was amazed that they could fly just by spinning things around. My flawless logic of the day was, if they can do it, why can't I? So seemingly without any discernible reason, little 4-year-old me put down his sandwich, marched to the top of the jungle gym, put his arms out at his sides and jumped off while spinning around in my best hechelopter impression. And that was how I got my first ambulance ride. In short, I accidentally tested ancient Chinese torture tactics on myself and also tried to be a helicopter at one point. I think so many people's stupidest moments can be summed up with, I can probably make this jump every single time. Hey guys, look, Mario just posted his answer. After a night of drinking, we went back to my then boyfriend's place to chill. He turned on the TV, but I had other ideas. I pulled the rolling chair away from his computer desk, placing myself between him and the TV. I turned the chair backwards, threw my leg over in what I thought was going to be a seductive manner, whipped my hair a little, and ended up putting my foot down on the edge of the wheelie part on the other side. I rolled my ankle and my momentum carried me all the way over to the floor. I hit the ground, the chair back smashed my face, and my nose started bleeding. Not my brightest moment. I asked my friend if he got his car back from the garage while we were sitting in it. I am not a smart man. I was in a wheelchair in the hospital room, with my leg propped up with the wheelchair leg holder. The doctor said my sock needed to be taken off for him to look, so someone went forward to do it for me. And I was like, no, it's cool, I got it, and leaned over to take my sock off. Turns out the brakes weren't on the wheelchair. The whole wheelchair leaned forward and I landed right on my propped out foot and sprained ankle. Let's see, where to start? I once killed a pint of vodka straight on a dare. Spent the rest of the night ralphing. I fell for a prank of laying a stick across a shovel handle and then stomping the shovel spade to see how high the stick would go. I had my windshield tinted to 5% on my car. I sent a Nairobi prince some cash so I'd get a big return. Yeah, I actually did do this. I voted for Ross Perot in '92. I volunteered for several things in boot camp without knowing what they were. I rear-ended a cop car. During the questioning, I got the involuntary giggles, and when the cop asked if I thought it was funny, I said yes. In Little League, I chased a ball under the bleachers from the backside. Imagine running fast as the bleacher seats get lower and lower. I cracked my head open. I hit on a starting linebacker's girlfriend at a frat party. I even knew it was his girlfriend. Noticed my low oil pressure light on in the car, decided I could make it to the next exit 10 miles away. I took bowling as a hypers class in college, cheated on the final exam and got caught. Decided to jump in the water to piss. Left the boat in gear. Spent half an hour trying to pick up a quarter that someone else had superglued to a sidewalk. I'm really not as dumb as all this sounds, I'm just impulsive. Damn it, Kevin, is that you again? This sir or madam is very hard to pin down. On the one hand, they're self-aware enough to know that all of these things are dumb. On the other hand, half an hour picking up the quarter? To get a refresher on who or what Kevin was, Watch our video, Teachers, what's your "that student definitely isn't going places" moment? Although maybe it's not him and it's this next guy. I fell asleep on a roof, a slanted roof. I rolled over. Ever have one of those dreams where you're falling? I woke up just before I hit the ground. I rode my bike under a truck. I made a slingshot that fired metal plates through trees. I took these plates off my father's cars and bikes. I made a stump remover, basically an IED for farm work. Got confused and got the measurements wrong. I figured this out while a 2-ton stump was about 80 feet in the air. I thought that my knife juggling skills would impress girls at a party. I'd been drinking heavily for that one. Did the deed on a trampoline. Advice: if you ever want to try that, don't. Your member can break. I also did the deed in the water at a beach. Advice: if you want to try this, don't. Sand gets everywhere, especially if you're uncircumcised. I shot myself with a .22 bullet. Not the gun, just the bullet. Well, and a hammer. I took half a pound of gunpowder to school. Tried to write my name on the football field. Turns out the guy with the distinctive name and no eyebrows can easily be identified. Another time I tried to jump a fence on a motorcycle, a barbed wire fence. Strangely, if this had gone just a little worse, the beach thing would have gone better. Parked my dad's car the wrong way, i.e. in a swimming pool. Tried to help a dog who'd been hit by a car. Had a large portion of my face torn open. That being said, I would do that one again. Lots more, but I'm a little tired. My wife thinks I'm stupid, by the way. People who've been clinically dead. Is there an afterlife? I was dead for 6 whole minutes. I was lying on the gurney and I was getting colder. However, at some point, my body actually started warming up and everything became really calm and peaceful. I was no longer in pain. The noise from ER just kind of went away. It was really enjoyable. I was thinking about my daughter and I was remembering all the things we had done. Slowly, it was just going black and nothing. There was no knowledge of anything. I explain it as it was like before I was born. Then, the worst thing in the world is being revived. I started hearing loud noises, I felt this massive pain, then there was the nastiest stench ever. The smell was like every dead animal had crawled in my nose. It was so bad that I started chucking up. I remember the doctors turning me on my side and watching me spray on a nurse. Dying was the most pleasant thing I've ever experienced, and being revived was the worst. Not really sure what happened, and it still freaks me out to this day. My daughter was 4 and developed pneumonia. Her breathing would stop in her sleep, so we took her into the emergency room. She was there for a total of 5 days. For the first 3, her health kept deteriorating, and on the 3rd day, my girlfriend got a call that her mother had collapsed and was taken to the hospital. She was without oxygen for 20 minutes and was declared brain dead. That night, my daughter woke up and asked about Grandma. No one had said anything to her or been in the room with her. We asked her what she meant, and she told us that Grandma came to her in a dream and said, "It's not your time yet. I'll go for you." Immediately the next day, my daughter was almost 100% better. Anaphylaxis. Wasn't breathing. I considered all the hallucinations I experienced likely due to hypoxic episodes until I told my mum what I saw. A middle-aged man who wasn't in scrubs, standing still at the end of my bed, while all the staff were running around and doing their business. I was having a non-verbal conversation with him, and he was telling me to calm down, focus on breathing. He wore a tropical-style button-down shirt, one of those old-school newsboys' hats, and had a very pleasant demeanor. Mum showed me a photo of my grandpa that I'd never seen before, and it was the guy at the foot of my bed, and he died before I was even born. A black void. Then waking up in ER surrounded by people running around like crazy. I was cold as all heck, but in reality, apparently I was at room temperature. I have to add that it was relatively peaceful, like being wrapped in a big warm blanket. The narrator went into this topic with some trepidation, shall we say, but I must say that so far at least, these stories are somewhat comforting and reassuring. Even if the idea of passing into the great beyond does scare a little, it's nice to know that near the end we chill out a bit before we pass and might be okay with what's happening. The next perspective seems to come from someone who's quite well read on the length and breadth of what people can see. There are some researchers who've been collecting and quantifying the data of near-death experiences, or NDEs, for years now. They've created 6 categories, or stages of NDEs, that generally sum up most experiences. The first is the hellish experience. It can either be a mildly uncomfortable experience, a cold, dark, damp, loveless experience, or the traditional flames and devil experience. Some say they're drawn out of this realm by an indescribable love. Very few people recount experiencing this one. The second is this other type of experience where one has an out-of-body perspective and can travel freely. Oftentimes, this happens in an operation room where one's heart has stopped and the doctors are working to revive the patient. The individual may be able to go to other rooms in the hospital or travel across the country. If they remain in the hospital room, they do not always recognize their own bodies on the table and can feel confused. I should note that there's been a surge in NDEs since the 1960s when resuscitation techniques actually became more advanced. The third is much like many of the other comments in this video. There's another experience of blissful, warm darkness that just feels comfortable. It's an indescribable nothingness, often without memory or any inkling of consciousness at all. The next experience is similar to the last, but with an additional light that's usually far away, that emanates warmth and love and forgiveness. The individual is either attracted to this light and goes towards it, or the light itself comes to the person. It allegedly gets better and better the closer one draws to the light, and so they continue. Obviously, this is where the phrase, "don't go towards or go towards the light" comes from. The fifth experience continues where the last left off, where the person has broken through the light to the other side. They're now experiencing a love and compassion or forgiveness state of consciousness that's unlike anything they can put into words. Sometimes they encounter a sort of guide. This could be a loving, anonymous being or a religious figure. If they experience this, it's sometimes linked to their beliefs on Earth, but not always. This experience is sometimes accompanied by the most beautiful music. This being may present them to loved ones or show them a life review. This is a very common experience to those who've had NDEs. It may be at this point where the NDEer decides or is told to return to their body. There's sometimes a choice. Often they choose to because they have work left to accomplish in their lives. And I put that last part in quotes because of how many people cite that as their reasons for coming back. The sixth and final experience goes beyond the previous state of love and consciousness and is experienced only by relatively few people compared to the previous others. They say that they experience a becoming one with the universe or universal energy that unites everything and maybe a god. They've stated that they understand everything and that knowledge is known just by thinking of a topic. As a disclaimer, people have different words to describe all of these experiences, but what they typically agree on is that words themselves can't come close to explaining the encounter. For all of the aforementioned NDEs, most experiences are overwhelmingly pleasant. They lose the fear of death, and they cannot wait to return to this state. However, they know they must wait for now. The NDEs that I've looked into pretty much all fall into these categories, so I'd like to hear any others that might not. As you can tell, this interests me greatly. I do want to end this by saying that if you do wind up researching NDEs, come to your own conclusions about them. Is there a reason for someone to be pushing a certain belief on you? I have confidence that what people say about their NDEs, they themselves wholly believe to be true. Whether or not you do is up to your own judgment. There are people who make videos and give talks about NDEs that they supposedly experience, but to me, some seem to be fake and over-rehearsed. Take what you want from my spiel. This is your NDE plug out. A friend of mine described hers as deeply relaxing and that she could feel herself drifting away, but was brought back just as she was ready to leave. After that, she embraced life and death. She said she doesn't fear death anymore since it was so relaxing to experience. I had a similar experience here. As you're dying, you start feeling tired in a way you never have before, or will again until you die. The sheer act of staying alive is exhausting. But then it's all blank until I woke up from a coma a couple of weeks later. You don't even remember the actual moment of death, and it takes weeks for your mind to remember everything leading up to it. I was in a ton of pain before and after because a couple of my organs were perforated, but dying itself wasn't painful. I agree that I'm also not afraid of death. Not even just because of the pain factor, but because it feels so much less unknown to me, and there isn't time for regret when it happens. I think about death a whole lot, like an insane, worrying amount. I cry about it a lot too. I'm terrified to die. I'm terrified of what comes after, and I'm terrified of losing people I love. This thread has actually made me feel a bit better about it, so thank you. I lost my mum last year, and I remember her telling me when I was little, because I'd say it first, that she was scared to die. I'm glad to know that it isn't as bad as we both thought. I hope that this video gives this feeling to more people who feel regularly anxious about this sort of thing. I'll say that so far the majority of accounts just seem to be a gentle falling asleep feeling, so that's nice at least. My girlfriend is anaphylactic, and it is triggered by a chemical called salicylate, which is found in pretty much every food. When she was in high school, she had her first big reaction, and the school nurses refused to administer her EpiPen, adrenaline shot, until the ambulance got there. Now, obviously, having an anaphylactic reaction doesn't give you a lot of waiting time, so by the time the ambulance got to her school, she was in pretty bad shape and barely conscious. The paramedics immediately administered one of her EpiPens, called the nurses fricking idiots, and loaded her into the ambulance as her mother arrived. She continued to fade, so they gave her a direct injection of adrenaline this time. Still nothing. They gave her a second direct injection of adrenaline, and this time it hits her about 30 seconds later, all at once, and her heart fails. She stops breathing, no pulse, nothing, dead to the world. For about 2 minutes and 46 seconds, she was clinically dead. And the scariest thing is, she saw nothing. She tells me that when you're losing consciousness, you can't tell the difference between waves of drowsiness and when your body actually shuts down. All she saw was the darkness of her eyelids, and it felt like going into an extremely calm sleep, where she couldn't hear or feel anything, and she didn't even mind it. All despite the fact that her mother and paramedics were screaming at her to keep her eyes open, and the ambulance was flying towards the hospital. She miraculously came back to life almost 3 minutes later as they were giving her chest compressions, and the cardiologist that assessed her later stated that all the adrenaline in her body was enough to not only stop her heart, but also to restart it, with a little help from the paramedic pumping it around. But still, to this day, she can't differentiate falling asleep after a long day and dying. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. OD'd, flatlined, didn't see a darn thing. When they hit me with the narcon, I woke up really mad, ripping IVs out of my arms, cursing out the poor, amazing staff who'd saved my life. Good times. 6 years ago now, with all that crap behind me, luckily. This is my story exactly. Waking up just angry as all heck. I want to go back to sleep. I told the medics to frick off. I'm going back to sleep, and I heard the scariest, "Do not fricking go back to sleep." Like he meant it with every fiber of his being. So terrifying. I didn't get to go back to sleep. I was on loads of morphine, so it's still really hazy, and the fact that it happened almost 6 years ago doesn't really help the memory, but I'll try to recollect as accurately as I can what happened and what I experienced. I had appendicitis, and my foster parents at the time didn't take me to the hospital until 2, almost 3 days after it had burst. I should have been dead well before they took me. Even the doctors called it a miracle. Well, I died while waiting for surgery. I had to wait for a pediatric surgeon to come in because no one else felt comfortable performing the surgery on a case this bad with a child this size. The morons took me to the adult hospital, not the pediatrics, which was 40 minutes away. I was 14, 5'3", and weighed 75 pounds soaking wet. So while I was waiting for the surgeon, I was in a room with me, the doctor, my 2 foster parents, and my grandmother, who was a residential nurse. Like I said, I was on a lot of morphine and couldn't really focus on much, and couldn't really do anything. The monitor I was hooked up to would beep really loudly from time to time, and the intervals between beeps started to decrease rapidly. Turns out I wasn't breathing. I was conscious for the most part, I just kept forgetting to breathe. Doctors had to keep nudging me so I wouldn't sleep. I just remember being really angry at this loud beeping that kept me from enjoying a nice slumber. The doctor had to step out for a second, and my grandmother assured him she could look after me for a while. Unfortunately for her, she was out of her mind with rage at my foster parents. She didn't hold anything back. My grandma is a sweet Mormon Utah without a rude bone in her body. Well, I heard quite a few FUs, pieces of crap, among other choice insults. My point is, she didn't notice I'd passed out until the monitor signaled I'd flatlined. This is the bit where I died, and it's by far the most vivid part of the experience. I remember being capable of thought, but no thoughts were in my head. I could only describe it as being conscious of my spirit, but without a body for my thoughts to be processed in. I just kind of existed without feeling, thinking, or being anything. I was floating. Honestly, at the time, it was a great feeling. I don't remember any visions of people, family, places, or anything like that. but I felt something wrap around me and comfort me. Without talking, I was assured I was okay, that there was nothing to be worried about, and at that point, my thoughts returned. I knew at that moment, without knowing how long I'd be able to keep thinking, that I had to go back. I didn't want to, but knowing that the last thing I'd see before I left mortal life was these two pieces of human garbage who'd bullied me, neglected me, and treated me like a stain that they didn't want to bother trying to clean up, that's what did it. I wanted to get back to my body, fix my fricking life so I could go back and live with my bio parents and feel loved again. In that moment, that's all I cared about. And then I sort of willed myself back. Doctors had tried to resuscitate me but failed. Everyone was shocked when I woke up, and seeing the tears in my grandma's eyes after thinking she had lost me, that did it. I fixed my life. I reinvented myself and threw out all of my anger, depression, rage, and everything else that put me in Brent and Karen's home. Honestly, the only anger I felt, the burning hatred kind that makes me want to do anything possible to release it, in the last 5-ish years since I moved from their home, is when I think about them and how they're still fostering youth in custody, and probably pulling the same crap with those kids. I live about an hour away from where they are now, and I have to restrain myself from driving up there, kidnapping those kids and taking them to the authorities with an explanation of why. The only reason I haven't done that is because I've tried telling the authorities what kind of people they are. I guess the words of a juvenile screw-up don't stack up against the lies from people who've practiced this crap for years. Anyway, sorry for the rant at the end. I know that wasn't entirely what the question was, but it felt good to type out. Thank you for asking this question. It's been surprisingly therapeutic talking about it. It means a lot to me even if you have no idea who I am. I'm by no means perfect, but working every day for a better life. I'm actually studying law and criminology because I want to join the police force and work with kids like me and try to help them understand that it gets better. And this is the other major recurring NDE, the outer body experience. It might sound like a movie trope, but it's quite lovely that your love for your family and desire to fix things was what brought you back as well. I hope you can help out as many people like your old self as possible with the great second chance that you were given. I know 3 people that have been clinically dead and have come back. What they described is something much different than what people are talking about here. They all said, if you paraphrase, that it feels as if you're passing out. Someone compared it to ODing or whippets, nitrous oxide. A feeling of your conscience slowly getting focused into one point in the exact middle of your head, while your limbs lose feeling in a tingling, pleasant way, and then you lose consciousness. One girl said that when she came back into conscience, she was hallucinating because she had no idea what was going on, and she started dreaming of something safe, which was her mother hugging her in a warm bed. I coded after surgery. I remember being able to see and hear everything and understand what was happening, but I couldn't physically feel anything. It was deeply unsettling. I'm going to have to speak for my dad here. He passed away a few years back. I wrote this out a while back actually, but maybe this will be a relevant place for it to be as well. Dad was fearful in his last days. He had been to the hospital many times, and every single time he came close to death. What he remembered didn't reconcile with what most people report when having a near-death experience. He, in fact, had a lot of bad experiences. One in particular was where he relived a day 3 times in a row where doctors sedated him, but he was still fully aware of what was happening to him. He could hear the conversations, feel the pain, feel the choking and suffocation. When I saw him the next day, he had tears in his eyes as he tried to communicate a question on how many days he'd been gone. When I told him one day, he was confused and it took him a while to wrap his head around it. He thought he'd gone to hell and this was his eternal punishment. He pondered for a long time on what he could have done to deserve that as a punishment. He didn't even want to be in the hospital. He hated them his whole life, and that experience made him hate hospitals even more. Dad's last trip, via ambulance, he actually walked out to the ambulance and it wasn't because of the usual shortness of breath, it was because of chest pains. I was sure this was going to be a short stay and he'd be back soon again. During this last stay, he experienced more sedation, more hallucinations, and more disorientation. I went to visit him every single day to get an update on his status. One night in particular, they had trouble getting his heart rate down. It was steadily beating at about 160 and would calm to 120 or so before going back up to 160. It wasn't looking good for him. Then, the next time he was up, I walked in right around his dinner time. He couldn't wait to talk to me, but he could barely talk. It took all of his effort and energy, but he had some things to say. He said, "Son, I know without a doubt that there is an afterlife." I said, "Really?"
He nodded. How are you so sure? You've been seeing things on the ceiling and all kinds of hallucinations.
That wasn't me. I wasn't here.
You weren't here?
I was there.
Okay, well, did you see anyone you knew?
He shook his head, no. It's not like that. You can see souls being born into life, and it's the most beautiful thing you can see. Everyone has their own color, and they're trying to get to white.
Trying to get to white?
He nodded again. Yeah, time doesn't exist there. Time is here because of us, and we're here because of time. I should have done more. He looked at his hands. I could have been another Jimmy Page. He was referring to his skill as a guitarist. I could have done more.
But you were the greatest dad, and…
He smirked a little to indicate that this wasn't what he meant. Do more and do everything you can.
So, like carpe diem? Seize the day?
Yeah, do everything you can. Don't worry about the consequences. Everyone finds their way. People worry too much about the consequences. Just do good and do as much as you can. Everyone eventually gets there. Tell the family.
Can I tell everyone?
Yeah, tell everyone.
Okay, Dad. I'll tell everyone.
Dad nodded in agreement. I could tell he was tired by this time.
I love you, Dad.
I love you too, son. This was the last conversation that I had with him. I miss him terribly, and I've been trying real hard to find myself again after his passing. It's been a long time, and I've been able to cope with it enough to finally write this all out. I hope it finds someone that needs to hear it. Not mine, but the head of my program was in a horrible car accident. She was dead for a few minutes on the scene while paramedics worked on her. She said it was the most amazing feeling she's ever experienced. It was blank nothing. But that was perfectly fine, and she felt a comfort she can't even explain. She remembers being angry at the man working on her when she finally came back to her body because she wanted to stay there. She told us she can't wait to experience it again and when it's really her turn. I'm really pleased this resonated so strongly with so many of you. I wanted to add some detail about her. She's not religious in the slightest, and she actively squashes our ghost stories and crap, like the ones we get from the mortuary students, because she only believes in tangible things. So she fully turned me into a believer in this sort of experience. I felt it's important I make a distinction that she was very adamant about when telling us this story. She's not advocating for self-deletion. She stressed that she wasn't telling us she's trying to reach this place again, but that when it was her time, she was going to be comfortable embracing it. What high school prank made you realize, oh, we went too far? So the senior class 2 years ahead of me forked the lawn in front of the school. That's a classic, right? Well, they took it a bit further. Instead of buying plastic forks in bulk, the seniors, for their whole school year, methodically pocketed the metal silverware for lunch and breakfast. Not every piece every time, but just enough that the lunch staff would think it was accidental loss. We have a small class size, so kids would bust their own trays by dumping the scraps into a big trash can, and sometimes people would forget to take their silverware off first and they'd get lost. We had regular announcements at lunch reminding us to make sure we didn't throw away the utensils. So in this massive conspiracy that only they knew about, they collected hundreds of metal utensils. The night before their last day of classes, they snuck into the school grounds and methodically stuck hundreds of forks, knives, and spoons into the grass a foot apart each. To make it worse, one of the two custodians had recently been fired, and the remaining custodian was an older guy who was perfectly kind and in an ideal world should have retired sooner. He had to pick them all up by himself. I heard one of the teachers came in early and helped him a little bit, and saw the custodian had tears falling down his cheeks. Spraying people with Nair hair remover. A group of kids staged a kidnapping one time. They borrowed a van and drove it in front of a busy shopping center. One guy, pretending to escape, jumped out the trunk all wrapped up in duct tape. To the horror of all the bystanders, the van stopped, two kids ran out and recaptured the escapee, and drove off. The cops had to go to their homes when the van was identified, and they had a lot of clearing up to do. Had a mate in a neck brace for a year because he and another mate would frequently push each other into things like walls, railings, and other things as a joke. The other mate decided to one-up him by pushing him down a flight of stairs. Okay, did the person who pushed him win that particular prank war or lose it? It kind of feels like he achieved the greatest amount of effect with his shove, so maybe he'd call it a victory? But let's not have a sequel to that. A kid decided to post on Facebook that he had a piece and he was going to go out in a blaze of glory at the school the next day. Then he didn't show up. The lockdown lasted 6 hours past the final bell. until they found this kid who wasn't actually packing heat. When I was a freshman, there was a tree that was planted when the school was founded. The seniors destroyed it and everyone was really angry at them. There was legend in my school of a senior class, before I was a freshman, who had dumped whole buckets of crickets into all of the school's garbage cans. Fast forward, and a fight broke out at lunch, and a student was knocked into one of the garbage cans, and thousands of crickets spilled onto the concourse, causing a massive riot. I'm talking about mobs of kids leaving the school. The school was infested with crickets for years. At my high school, when I was a freshman, a group of seniors had broken into the school the night before, with hundreds of bottles of lubricant to grease up all of the staircases in the school. Like 15 kids went to the hospital. One kid cracked his head open and had to be rushed to the ER. A guy in my school had a crummy old car that the lock was broken on and could easily be put in neutral and pushed around. The steering still locked, so mostly kids would push it into a parking space ahead or behind of it. One day they pushed it and it got away from them and it damaged a teacher's car. The kids owned up to it, but considering the owner was so sick of his car being messed with, he called the police. Turns out moving a car a few meters is considered vehicle theft around here, and 3 kids were charged and expelled. Someone let a greased pig loose in the school. It basically ran around and was pretty funny. The teachers did try to catch him, but basically they opened doors and figured the pig would run outside. The janitor went full caveman and killed the pig with a broken broom handle. Blood all over the floor. The janitor was fired that day. This is around a week after the Parkland shooting in Florida. Some freshmen thought it would be a cool idea to bring in a BB pistol during school hours. All the staff thought he was an actual school shooter, and there were lockdowns with everyone ready to throw some heavy books at the first person who came into their rooms. This kid got expelled, and some say that he got sent to juvie. I should have probably provided more context. The guy was planning to play a prank on a friend of his by pulling out said piece. And that's how I spent 3 hours in my chem class panicking. Also, how the staff realized. A year before I transferred to a school, I learned that some seniors greased the steps with baby oil, causing students to slip and fall, including teachers, one of whom was several months pregnant. The principal ordered that they do not get to walk for graduation. There was this whole mess with the parents fighting to get the punishment overturned. Some of the students got punished and others got to walk for graduation. The parents were like, "No one got seriously hurt and it was just a prank." But seriously? At high school, someone in my year group decided it would be funny to run and tackle a bin that was leaning on a pole. He then pretended to be unconscious, and as the group of students watched on, rumors started to go around that he had jumped off the second-story walkway and tackled the pole in midair, and then fallen to the ground. He continued to pretend to be unconscious, and as soon as the ambulance arrived to check on his injuries, he suddenly jumped off and ran into the distance and out of the school. Seniors in my school locked all of the exits with bike locks and pulled the fire alarm. They were charged. A guy in my class put a tack on a chair like in old cartoons. When a classmate sat in said chair, it was not funny. A couple of underclassmen crashed a wholesome senior prank and ruined it. The original prank was spray painting the graduating class year all over the building in washable paint, but these kids came by after they were done and did swears and slurs. The graduating class almost didn't walk until parents kept complaining that their kid or kids weren't at fault. They ended up having to do whatever they did to cover up the writings, and there was still a pillar with a Johnson on it a few weeks afterwards. When I was a freshman, the senior prank was releasing farm animals into the school. A couple had to be put down because of injuries they sustained while running loose. And my senior year, someone crapped on the cafeteria floor and then surrounded it with some sort of clear oil. One of the janitors got hurt trying to clean it up. I'm all for funny pranks, but this was just vandalism and cruelty. In my senior year, my genius classmates thought it would be a good idea to take all of the books out of the library and make a giant book mountain. Needless to say, we spent about 7 hours learning the Dewey Decimal System. I was livid when the administration forced our whole class to resort the books, even though it was 3 idiots who made the whole mess. Someone bought multiple bottles of this stuff called liquid ASS, and absolutely poured like 10 bottles of the stuff in the men's restroom. It was truly the smell of putrid, rotting, dead elephant doo-doo. It was horrendous. If I smelled a dead body, it would be the second worst thing I've ever smelled. It was that bad. Our poor janitor was assigned to clean it up, so he walked in and immediately projectile chucked all over the bathroom and quit the job on the spot. We were now out a janitor, and the mess now had the addition of his stomach contents on top of 10 bottles of liquid butt. It took a while to find a new janitor, so the vom just sort of sat there for a week and was basically a biohazard at that point. The new janitor eventually cleaned the mess in a full bodysuit, but even after bleaching everything, we could still smell it for over 6 months. They had to permanently remove the front door to that bathroom. The narrator is mildly curious about how bad this stuff could really smell, but there were multiple follow-on comments about how this particular product has resulted in expulsions and entire areas of schools being condemned. So I guess it must be pretty bad. And having just checked online, I can see that it's still being sold despite all of this. During one of my siblings' tenure, a few students broke into the gymnasium and turned hoses onto the basketball court. Completely ruined everything as it ran a good part of the night. I believe they caught and expelled all of them. And my class had a few people superglue as many door locks as they could reach. That really made everyone happy. Why the old carry the teacher's Volkswagen into the quad prank that at least only caused some inconvenience and not property damage became a thing of the past, I'll never know. Someone shot out a bunch of windows at my high school, much more aggressive than the staircase covered in little cups of water. Someone put a couple of dead fish in the laundry dryer at my boarding school. Also had a 3-year string of phantom poopers who would just take random number 2s in places like corridors, urinals, and other things. Must have been different people because you can only be there for 2 years at a time. Most people do 1. Someone put their own number 2 under a teacher's desk. For mine, a guy found a dead pigeon and the class decided it would be fun to hide it inside a hardcover folder that a teacher left on her desk. The only problem was that the pigeon would bulge the folder, so they had no better idea than to put it inside and then stomp the folder, and by extension pigeon, flat. When the teacher, who was preggers at the time, opened the folder, she yelled in terror and fainted. They took her out to an ambulance, and on the next day the principal informed the class that the teacher lost the baby, and that they were lucky if she didn't press any charges. Needless to say, they never told anyone whose idea it was or who participated in the prank. I wouldn't really call this a prank, but a kid once wrote the name of another kid in his own number 2 on the toilet wall. This was a fate worse than death for the unsuspecting victim. Cries of derision could be heard throughout the building. Malicious rumors were spread for weeks. The poor kid was subjected to a social death sentence. A dead man walking. It wasn't until a fateful rainy Thursday afternoon after PE that the wrongly accused was exonerated when the real crapasso fell victim to his own hubris and was caught brown-handed in the act of fecal graffiti. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Someone slipped Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds into a teacher's coffee. He was tripping. I think back on it now and I feel sad for him. I broke into my friend's middle school email account in the middle of the night to send his current email address a message from the future. The message was inspired by that one prank from The Office where Jim sends Dwight faxes from the future about the coffee being poisoned. My dumb butt took it one step further and said that my friend needed to stop me and my other friend from playing the piano at break, as otherwise a bomb would go off. My friend took this seriously and alerted a teacher, who immediately knew it was me. Yes, the police were called and my butt was nearly suspended, and I was grounded for a month by my parents. Going back about 15 years ago, a group of 10 to 13 senior kids decided to try and raid our community school and literally rip off all the tube lights, bending all the ceiling fans, smash some walls, among other things. There was quite a substantial amount of damage. At the time, CCTVs weren't all that famous or used, so it was difficult to identify. But luckily, there were some eyewitnesses, and the boys and their parents were immediately summoned. Kids were suspended, and parents were asked to foot the bill. Oh, and the kids were named and shamed in front of the whole community. One guy from my school sprayed some pepper spray in the air during class because he thought it'd only make everyone's eyes sting a bit. Ended up with some students almost suffocating to death, the whole floor getting evacuated, and the guy getting expelled. This was actually in middle school. The bathrooms had particularly low ceilings. One day, some kids went into the girls' bathroom during class time, I guess when the least amount of people would be in there, and somehow managed to get a chair up into the ceiling tiles. Many girls knew they did this, and we all thought it was pretty funny. We forgot about the chair for about a week until it came crashing down onto a girl who was using the loo. This girl was very frail and super underweight. It came down and knocked her out. The school went on lockdown while the paramedics took her to the hospital. Luckily, she was fine. They locked the bathrooms the rest of the year and only opened them between classes. Many kids would go to the nurse to use the bathroom when they couldn't hold it in class. They put toilet paper in every tree. It's been 2 years and the toilet paper is still there in some trees. Some guys thought it would be funny to put a 6-pack of beer and a doobie in my trombone case during class. Fricking everyone saw them do it, but I got caught with it. A guy at my school broke into the teacher's lounge and microwaved ghost pepper popcorn. They thought it would just make everyone's eyes water a little bit. They basically maced everyone in the tiny compact hallway that the teacher's lounge was in. The school has no idea who did it, but classes in that hallway had to be relocated. This all happened a couple of years before I started high school, but someone released thousands of crickets into the building. They're still in the air ducts and we can't get them out. All of the air vents have been locked shut until a solution is found. What is it with this particular prank that's made it come up more than one time? Where do people buy all these living invertebrates from? Is it a freaking bait and tackle shop that's just doing the motherlode of all business one time a year? What a prank to pull, decimating your school for years to come. Maybe not the coolest move, guys. For a senior prank at my high school, a group of kids stole a ton, if not all, of the bathroom stall doors. While the administration was trying to figure out who did it or how to replace all the missing doors, they had makeshift plywood doors installed. They eventually caught the kids who did it and formally charged them with theft and a few other things. It was pretty genius, though. To pay the legal fees, the kids got a crapload of t-shirts printed with the phrase, "I prefer the plywood," and most of the school bought them in solidarity. So, all in all, kind of a heartwarming ending to a too-far situation. In my brother's school about 10 years ago, apparently these seniors tried to prank their teacher by putting 3 pills for male performance in his coffee. Legend has it he taught with a chair blocking his groin the entire time. During every winter, this giant flock of seagulls would always show up at my high school and hang out around campus until springtime. The majority of students ate lunch outside in this huge central courtyard. The seagulls were so annoying and constantly hovering and pretty much begging for food. It was also common to get your food stolen by one if you weren't looking. One day, a fellow student had some string in his backpack. So he took 6 feet or so of string, tied a bite-sized piece of pizza to one end, and an empty 20-ounce soda bottle to the other. We then proceeded to throw the contraption into a group of seagulls. We never thought they'd fall for it. One seagull swallowed the pizza and started to fly across campus with the string and bottle floating behind him, hanging from his beak. The rest of the seagulls freaked out and were flying behind him as if they were chasing him. The funniest part was that a random female student looked up, saw what she believed to be a floating empty soda bottle and screamed in horror, "Oh my god, that bottle is floating!" The seagull then voided its stomach of the pizza string contraption and went about his life unharmed. We felt really bad after that and decided to not prank the seagulls anymore. As an update, a few days later, some younger kids, freshmen, tried to mimic our little prank. Except it all went wrong for them. The seagull fell for the bait, but ended up getting caught in a tree. The freshmen then started to panic, fearing they'd be in trouble if caught, and had to boost each other up to free the seagull from the tree. The seagull was fine and flew away, but after that, the pranking of seagulls came to an official end. Seniors killed a deer, stuffed it in a hockey bag, and dumped the carcass in the stairwell. Some seniors came in at night and moved all the desks and whiteboards so the classrooms were now set up outside. School was outside the next day. The school made them clean up at the end of the day, and they repeated the same prank 5 more times. My old high school had a rivalry with another one in the same district. Years ago, the football teams would play pranks on each other. They escalated to the point of the other high school killing a black cat and hanging it from a tree at our school. Our mascot was panthers. Someone placed posters of anime tentacle material around the school in various locations. A separate group of guys took everything out of a classroom and put it all on the roof. The school didn't tolerate end-of-year pranks after that. I coated my desk with hand sanitizer and set it on fire, and told my teacher my desk was doing that thing again. A girl a year or two above me sent this kid in my year a photo of her in a state of undress, and not just a regular one. She was putting her fist inside herself. He sent it around to everyone, and someone printed it off hundreds of times and put it up all around the school. Not necessarily a school prank, but childish nonetheless. I was in the car business, and a couple of guys went back and forth pranking each other's cars. I don't remember the second-to-last move, but the final one was a little over the top in my opinion. The finisher decided he'd had enough and removed the metal bottom door plate on an older car and lined the underneath with sardines. Once he screwed the plate back on, no one could figure out where that stink was coming from. We didn't all hear until later what he actually did, but the guy he did it to ended up selling his car at a loss because he couldn't get rid of the smell. I had friends that would dry dock and upper deck. Dry docking is flushing all of the water out of the commode by turning the water off. Proceed to take a nasty number 2 without water. It's an awful cleanup. Upper decking is removing the top of the toilet, going number 2 in the upper tank, and waiting for someone to discover it. Yeah, my friends are jerks. The kids at my school nominated the weird homely girl for prom queen. When I was a freshman, the seniors hung up a blacklist everywhere in the building, which depicted all the people, mostly freshmen, they hated for no specific reason. On their last day, all of them were completely wasted. They started chasing all the people whose names and pics were on the blacklist, tied them up and brought them to the stage, while the rest of the school sat downstairs, being the audience. They embarrassed these people on the stage. They poured water over them and pushed their wet heads into flour and other stuff that got sticky with the water. Some of the victims got over it fast and laughed about it later, while some broke down crying, not ever wanting to go back to school again. Later, we all had to talk to our teachers about this and tell them how we felt about it. I wasn't on that blacklist, but I knew some of the students who were. It didn't seem like it was about fun anymore. By the time I was a senior, we weren't allowed to do anything of the sort anymore, so we just threw some water balloons at the other kids. It was a hot summer's day, so everyone actually liked it. My brother's senior class decided it'd be a fun prank to break into school in the middle of the night. They put dead fish in lockers, shaving cream all down the halls, and broke into the main office and smashed some computers. They then egged the outside for good measure. That hallway smelled like crap for a good month afterwards. None of them faced any legal consequences because one of the kids' dads is a lawyer, but I think they lost their scholarships. Someone took all of the books out of the library and set them outside. The librarians had to spend the next few days trying to reshelve every single book. I don't know what my class did, but the class above me ran down the halls and sprayed either skunk or liquid butt everywhere. The dumb part was, they still had to go to class like the rest of us, so they had to smell that gosh-awful smell the whole day like everyone else. People gagged, some threw up. It was awful. These D-bags wanted to trick a girl who was in the special ed class to go with them to prom only to stand her up. Thankfully, it was stopped before it actually happened, but that still makes me angry to this day. What's the dumbest scam you've ever encountered? Hello, this is John from Windows. Your computer has viruses, I will help you get rid of them. I just got an email entitled Employment Opportunity from someone calling themselves Mr. Manager. Mr. Manager sits at his desk in frustration, unable to find anyone to take his emails seriously. I was once emailed that someone had put a hit out on me, and the only way to get the hit off was to pay the individual double. I responded telling him to bring it on. He emailed me back saying it was a final warning. That was 4 years ago, and I'm still waiting on you, mystery hitman. I just got this in my spam folder. Hi honey, my name is Chelsea. I'm a business lady. Unfortunately, I spend most of my time working and have absolutely no time for my private life. My colleagues at a coffee break gave me the site where I can find a person with whom I can date without any obligations. I found your profile in Facebook and consider you very attractive.
I just need a nice guy to spend a few hot weekends with. Any offers are welcomed and money is not an object. The big tell? I don't have Facebook. My mum met a guy on a dating site, and within a couple of days, he started telling her how rich he was, how many luxury cars he had, and how he had a mansion, and that he wanted to take her on a tour of the world and give her everything she ever wanted. And then he told her that his daughter was in a dancing competition in Germany and broke her leg, and because he was in another country on a job, he couldn't wire her the money for her medical bills, and they wouldn't send her home until he did. So all my mum had to do was send a few $1,000s to the address he specified, and then once he was back in the country, he'd pay my mum back 3 times over, and then get married to her, and she'd live happily ever after. My mum believed him. She practically disowned all her family and friends for this obvious scammer. We had to have an intervention with her and explain to her exactly what this guy was doing. Luckily, she couldn't afford to send him $10, much less thousands, so she never fell to the actual scam. Of course, once she told him she couldn't send him the money, his dating site profile was deleted, his email was deleted, his Facebook was deleted, and his phone number was disconnected. Oof. I don't know how long ago this was, but honestly, the narrator was under the impression that nobody had fallen for one of these in the last 10 years. I guess people's hope at finding Mr. or Mrs. Gorgeous Sugar Daddy remains an effective blindfold to this day. That some email pill could make my eggplant up to 4 inches longer. I'm not sure anyone would want a 16-inch eggplant, though. Yeah, well, that's why you don't take 3 pills. I used to get spam emails saying, "Make your eggplant faster." They didn't work too great. Oh, here's one for you. Several years ago, I was desperate to find a job. This resulted in me applying to every listed position on every job search site, for which I was even remotely qualified. The most prompt response I received was from a business that was allegedly in the computer peripherals market. My job, according to the typo-riddled description that arrived in my email, would be to process payments from big-name clients, like some sort of unaccountable accountant. As I read through the rest of the letter, the alarm bells in my head didn't even bother to ring. They just laughed hysterically at the sheer audacity and stupidity of the attempted scammer. Here's why. First of all, I was expected to receive checks from these clients, deposit them to my personal account, and then purchase a money order for 80% of the original account and wire it to somewhere or other. The 20% I deducted was to be my commission for each check I processed. This, for people who aren't familiar with it, is a classic money order or wire con. It's laughably obvious. On its own, this would have been more than enough to highlight the scam. But it didn't stop there. In addition to my commissions, I would supposedly be paid a substantial salary. However, in order to claim it, I'd have to provide all of my personal information, up to and including the PIN for my ATM card. This, according to the given explanation, was to prevent fraud. And it gets better. The last few lines of the job offer included a very specific request, which had apparently been added as an afterthought. I say this because it was in a different font and different format, and was even more rife with grammatical errors than the rest of the letter. It stated that if, and only if, I was a female, one of the requirements for employment was that I send 2 photographs to the hiring manager. One was a full-body shot of myself clothed, and one a full-body shot of myself completely undressed. This would be used to verify my identity, and would not be shared with anyone else in the business world or media. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the general wordage. Anyways, I wish that scammer all the best, and I hope he enjoyed those photos of Rosie O'Donnell with a beard. I keep getting employment emails that begin, "Hello, beloved." Something in me always wants to respond with, "Well, hi there, sugar muffin." An older gentleman I know has been sending money to his wife from Europe that he met online. He's never met her in real life, and he keeps sending her money so she can travel across the sea to see him. Every time she gets close, something happens so that he needs to send her more money. For example, she managed to lose her MacBook Pro and her new iPhone not once, but twice. He wired her the money for new ones. She also booked a flight, but for some odd reason, the airport was on a lockdown and she needed an extra few thousand to get on the plane. Then, before she got onto the flight, she happened to get sick, requiring tens of thousands of dollars in medical bills. And this is all a true story.
He's painted a picture of some beautiful young blonde on his bedside. He's a 70-year-old man weighing more than 450 pounds. She calls him on the phone from time to time, and he keeps sending her money. His family has tried to help him, but he's convinced that she exists and wants to come to the States to bang it out and start a life with him. From listening to his conversations, I'd say he's spent upwards of $100K over the past 3 years. I win the UK lottery at least once a month. I'm from the US. Hot single girls in your area are waiting to talk to you. I once got an email that had the subject line simply saying, "Turbines for your meat jet." I once got an eggplant enlargement spam email that said it was from Mum. Because yeah, that's exactly whose opinion I'd want on that topic. This is off the top of my head. It's a phone call that I had about 2 months ago. I instantly knew it was a scam, so I played the game with them. They said, "Hello, this is Peter from Microsoft. I'm calling you about the virus you have on your computer." "Oh, really? I didn't know I had a virus." "Yes, you do. Now could you please turn on your computer?" "Okay. Now could you open up your antivirus software and turn it off, as we need to do a clean sweep." "Okay, I did it." "Now open up your internet and go to this website." He proceeded to spell out a website that was just jumbled up letters and numbers. "I'm on it now, okay." "Okay, do you see out the form? Fill out your details such as name, date of birthing, bank account, PIN number, and the security questions." "And after I do that, then what?" "Click the download button and proceed to install our new and improved antiviral program. At this point, I'm supposed to ask if you have any questions." "Ah, yes. If you're from Microsoft, why are you talking to me? I own an Apple Mac computer." He proceeded to give me some bullcrap answer and I just hung up. I sent some information that I got from the phone call to my phone service provider and asked them to forward the information to whatever government group was involved with tracking these scammers down. I got a reply about it, and a month after that, I saw that they'd been caught. In short, helped catch scammers and had fun messing with them, making them think they were about to make money. You're doing the Lord's work there, my friend. Even if you hadn't caught them, it's just so very good to waste their time as much as possible. If everyone did what you do, there'd probably be far fewer people trying to pull this crap. My favorite was when I supposedly won a Sony laptop. They tried to make it look like the email was from a supermarket, but at the end of the statement they put, "Very lucky, winky face." Seemed legit, right? See, I got several along the lines of, "Congratulations, your contest entry has won for this month," followed by a link that's usually a random string of numbers and letters. What is this contest you speak of? And how did I enter it and not remember entering anything? Spooky. I sometimes get an email from the Bank of America saying, "Find out what Banks is saying about your credit." Anytime I get a phone call that starts off with, "This is not a marketing call." I got one once from a guy claiming to be a captain and so on from the Marines. The subject heading was, "Help me." Basically, he wanted to wire me a few $1,000,000 to keep safe for him because he was in Iraq. It made absolutely no sense. I got one once from someone claiming to be a rich old lady. She insisted that I could trust her even though hooligans, cads, and ne'er-do-wells sometimes try to steal your personal information over email. The whole thing read like the sender Googled stereotypical things old ladies might say before they wrote it, which they probably did. Also, anytime the sender doesn't capitalize I, even though they apparently are a CEO of the Bank of England, it's a bit of a giveaway. Craigslist in the personal M for W section. My favorite is, "Oh hey, I'm really lonely and need to be effed. We should hang out tonight because my hoo-ha needs a good pounding. By the way, I have a crazy ex and have met some weird creeps on here. So here's a website that'll just give a background check. You only need your credit card to prove it's you, but it's completely free. And then when you do that, you can come and F my brains out. Oh yeah, my username is ILoveSuckingEggplants23. My phone number is on my profile, so just call me when you're done the process." Reply, "Frick you, you dirty working girl." "Hey, glad you replied. I thought maybe you'd think I'm a whack working girl, so I'm still waiting for you on that site. Just making sure. Can't wait for you to shove your package in me." Uncle Rico bought a time machine on the internet once. It was a piece of crap that didn't work. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Hello, my name is Price Ntumbu of Nigeria. My father recently died and left me with $400 million. I cannot access this money directly and need a third-party bank account to deposit into. If you let me use yours, you shall be given $40 million. If you agree, please send me your bank details. Sincerely, Prince Ntumbu of Nigeria. I've seen some great scammer names while partaking in the wonderful hobby of scam baiting. The focus was also on Nigerian scams. Most of the names were pretty obviously crap and not all that spectacular, though enough to make me chuckle. However, there was one scam bait I remember reading about where the scammer had been the victim of what is referred to as de-education. In other words, a scam baiter had basically convinced this other scammer that certain terminology and language was going to be more effective when put to use in their scam. The product of this particular case of de-education was that the scammer had begun to use the name Shielder Onions and referred to an associate named Mr. F. Baggin. I have some items for sale on Craigslist and the ads state in bold, cash only, no PayPal or Western Union, local pickup only, and every single time I renew them, I'll get at least one, have read the ad to satisfaction and want to buy. Please pull the ad so I ascertained it is mine. Want to purchase immediate but am taking smapples from duck cloacas in mountains. Please go to paypal.com and set up account. My shipper will pick up. God bless. I respond that I'm not sure of the legality of conducting business transactions with the illiterate and I spam block them. A personal favorite was one that claimed to be on a Navy base in my state that had closed back in the early 90s. I asked if they were aware of the laws about trespassing. I had my horse up for a free lease and I got an email from someone in Nigeria saying they'd like to pay $1 million for, insert the title of my horse's ad here, because he was such a majestic creature, followed by the usual, give me your banking info through a third party detail. My uncle from South Africa left me $23 million. But they will need $5,000 to transfer the funds, and they need my bank account number. I don't have family in Africa. Hi, do you still have item for sale? What is the best price? Hi, do you still have copy-paste title here? For sale still? Or any of those I get when I try to sell on Craigslist? Honestly, I'm pretty sure that I've sent cover letters in this state before, having forgotten to fill in the blanks that my template has for the job requirements, and why I fulfill them. Sometimes it's hard to care so much about every application. So I used to work at Adult Protective Services. We investigate mistreatment, neglect, and exploitation of vulnerable adults. They could be elderly or disabled. We had a case where a woman who had a very low IQ answered an email from an African prince who said he'd marry her and make her his princess if she wired him $1,000 to buy a plane ticket to come to the States. She'd do it, and then she'd go to the airport for him and he never showed up. He said he missed the flight or some other excuse. She really thought this guy was for real and wired thousands to the scammer. She blew her social security checks. The case finally had to be handed over to the Attorney General in our state. The scammers were overseas and she kept willingly sending her money, so I don't think anything got done. It was pretty sad and pathetic. I think she was going to have to get a conservator. Water energizing crystals, just $400. I got regular emails from Lloyds TSB, it's a bank for those not in the UK, asking me to confirm my bank details. I bank with a different bank. So I know we all love to talk about the bad English and grammar in these things, but these scams are actually worded so ridiculously and so ludicrously that, and I use this word loosely, intelligent people such as ourselves immediately disregard this message as it's clearly a scam. If they were to make these messages more coherent and, dare I say, plausible, people such as you or I might question whether or not their situation was real. Fast forward a bit and we've contacted our distant cousin or this mysterious benefactor. They now need to put in time and effort in order to continue to con us. However, as the con goes on, we're more and more likely to realize that this is, in fact, a con. Once this occurs, we cut off communication or begin to troll, thus wasting the con man's time. However, if a person who reads this poorly written message and thinks, "Oh my lord, it's my lucky day. Ma! Come in here and look at what Mr. Manager sent me. I told you I wouldn't always be living in your basement," and then goes on to respond, chances are that they're far more likely to fall victim to the scam, thus allowing the scammer to focus his energies on the more susceptible. Oh, I actually fell for this one. I got an email from Wells Fargo stating that my account was compromised. The email looked so legit with the right colors and links. For a moment, I fell for it. I started filling out my information until I realized that no one should ever ask me for my PIN unless they were scamming me. That's when I realized I'd messed up. I removed my information and closed it. The real Wells Fargo informed me that even though I didn't click submit, that they could still receive what I typed in. Wells Fargo helped me with canceling my cards, changing my PIN, and changing my online banking info. Normally, I'm really good at spotting scams, but this one was very well done. It played my emotions really well. They said my information may have been compromised, and I swear that their email looked so legit along with the site I was linked to. Once I was linked to that site, I noticed the URL was strange, because it didn't say wellsfargo.com, among other things. So slowly, my brain put everything together and realized that I fell for what I warn a lot of elderly people on the internet about. A red flag for me is anything that uses the word humbly. I once got an email, supposedly from a dying lady with an English-sounding surname. She said that God spoke to her and told her to give some millions of dollars estate to some random that she doesn't know, i.e. me, because her children wanted to steal it all and squander it. She left me her email, which ended with @blahblah.ph, PH is for the Philippines, and the email address of her lawyer, who also had an English-sounding surname, but the address was registered with a site in Istanbul. There was also the time I got offered a job in Nigeria. Seriously, why would anyone in the US go to Nigeria for a random, unsolicited promise of work? When I was about 16, I spent a good amount of time traveling from Delaware to New York, so we were in Manhattan, and I was walking down Canal Street. I see this little shop. The shop window says, "We make ID cards." I wanted an ID that said I was 18 so I could buy my own cigarettes, not even to buy liquor with, just cigarettes. I went in and they showed me this huge cardboard display with all these different ID cards. I ask her how much and she says $60. Takes half an hour. I didn't want to drop the $60 even though it looked awesome. So I left and wound up somewhere in that same area a couple of blocks off Canal Street. A black guy asks for a cigarette. Well, he didn't really ask, he said, "Let me get one of them cigarettes." I gave him one and just straight up asked him if he knew where I could get a fake ID. He says, "Sure, $20, follow me." I'm already lost, I don't even know how to get where we parked our car. So we walk for a couple of minutes and he says, "You got that 20 on you?" I say yes, he says, "Good. Look, I'm going to need you to get 2 more $20 bills so I can compare them to the first one and make sure they're real." I say, "Yeah, sure bro, let me go hit the ATM." And I was gone. Went back to the Chinese place, paid the 60, was out in under 20 minutes. And then subsequently had that ID taken by the ATF. I had the, "I have chosen your email randomly. I'm an exceptionally wealthy oil tycoon who is dying. I want your bank account details so I can put $1 bazillion into and you will donate to charities, and for your services you can keep $2 million for yourself." I wrote back expressing my concern and empathy that he was dying, and that seeing as he has not so much time on this earth, we wouldn't want to be waiting around for the bank to process $1 bazillion from an overseas bank account, so he could have my PayPal name so he could quickly and effectively transfer money with no risk of rejection or timely error from the bank. I then wished him well and stated I hoped to hear from him soon. He never did reply, so I can only conclude rich oil tycoon fellow died tragically, alas, before his money could be donated to good causes. It changed my entire view on these spam messages when someone pointed out to me that they're transparent on purpose, so that it weeds out the less gullible responders. The more ridiculous the email, the less time wasted on people who'll bail when they get further down the chain. By making them only so really stupid people will respond, guarantees that 100% of the people who respond are stupid and therefore more likely to get scammed. My brother is the HR manager of this company. He got an email saying, "The HR department needs to update your social security information," from HR at his company. His company only has 5 employees, and he is the HR department. Maybe not hilariously transparent, but still a scam. My dad has a little hostel and encounters a lot of spammers. One of their best tricks works with fake religious organizations. They ask for 1 or 2 rooms and just ask about the prices. After agreeing on the price, they directly deposit the money in your bank account. Until this point, everything seems fine. Unfortunately, they accidentally deposited too much money in your account, but that's no problem either. Now, the fishy part happens. They either ask you to use the leftover money to pay someone in cash, like a bus driver, organizer, some important person who's managing their stay, or send it back via Western Union or something. My dad never fell for it, but it was pretty close when it happened the first time. I once got an email when I was 15 stating that my father had lost his passport during his recent vacation to Ireland and needed me to send him $4,500 to help him get a new one. I shouted downstairs and confirmed that my dad was in the living room, as he had been for the past few hours after waking up in America, where he's been for about the past 20 years. Secret heroes. What are you proud of but can't tell anyone who knows you? When I was 15, I would browse Omegle because I was a randy little fricker. One day, I met a girl who was my age. We talked for a while, we roleplayed, and then we traded images. We'd then spent the next few days talking and occasionally doing other stuff together as well. After we'd been talking for 4 months, we thought we loved each other. We always had each other's backs, and we always talked and helped each other. We wanted nothing more than to meet up and all that jazz. Eventually, we cooled off, talking for a bit. Then about 2 months later, she started to tell me about her mental illness. She talked about how she wasn't feeling herself, how she was feeling lost and depressed all the time. Then one day in January of my sophomore year, she texted me during school. It was something along the lines of, "I want you to know that no matter what happens, I love you and I want to thank you for being a big part of my life." I left health class and immediately went to the bathroom and began telling her that she was loved and she couldn't go like this. Thank God for the hours of browsing memes on Imgur at the time, because I remembered they said, "Don't try to help, best thing to do is call a professional." This will only make this longer, but this advice saved her life. My brother had had to do the same thing with a friend he knew in real life, and he said that he was hesitant to call 911 as it felt like he was betraying his friend. His English teacher had told his class that calling 911 will be hard to do, and it'll feel like betrayal, but it has to be done. I remembered my brother telling me that, so I acted. I just called 911 and told them my friend was about to try to self-delete, and told them the town she lived in. They directed me to the police department of where she lived, and I talked to them and told them her name and that she was in high school. I came out of the bathroom and went back to my health class after an hour of calling the police and trying to keep her in contact with me. When I got back, I was directed by my health teacher to the counselor because I was crying. The counselor called her school and told them what was going on and asked to be updated. About a week later, she texted me telling me she was doing okay. They took her to the hospital and gave her medicine and a shrink. She said she was upset with me initially, but ultimately glad. And her parents said they were eternally grateful. A month later, she said she was feeling a lot better. It's now almost 2 years. We don't talk too much, but when we Snapchat, she always tells me she's doing great. She recently posted that she's finally finished her sessions for therapy. That's my story. I'll never tell those I know because I don't want to tell people I used to go on Omegle until 3 a.m. looking for girls. Only me, my counselor, and she know what happened, and truly only the two of us know all the details. I hope this helps someone who finds themselves in this situation. Really sorry for the long story. In short, I saved a girl I knew through Omegle from finishing things by calling 911. If you're ever in that situation, you'll almost certainly worry about calling them because it'll seem like betrayal, or you think you can just talk them down yourself, maybe. Please, call 911. Do it. It works. Thank you for that, and for what you did for that girl. I'm honestly thrilled that a randy teen finding people to tickle their pickle to resulted in a life saved. I wonder what other unexpected capeless heroes we'll meet in our time here. I don't tell people I know that I wipe my grandma's butt for her. I take care of her full time, and I'm really proud of myself for keeping her clean, happy, and as healthy as she can be. Part of that entails showering her and of course helping her in the bathroom. It's weird to talk about with friends, since nobody really wants to hear about that, obviously, but I feel proud of myself for helping her in her time of need. It gives me a weird sense of comfort knowing that my grandma doesn't have a dirty butt. I walked in June 2013 for my bachelor's graduation. I was just 2 units shy of actually obtaining the degree. I told all of my family and friends that I'd graduated. Right at that time, my mum got sick and I moved her out to me and took care of her the last 2 years of her life. I never went back to finish those 2 units. I enrolled this past September and just completed all the coursework for my degree. I now just have to submit my graduation application and I'll have that piece of paper. I'm 33 and I've been working towards it for 10 years now. I'm 51 and my husband and I are having great times in the bedroom, maybe the best in our marriage. Most of my friends have stopped themselves or their partner has stopped. I can't fathom it. We work at it, and it's like going out to play tennis or something. And yeah, no one wants to hear this. Just use it or lose it, folks. I know that this is a small thing, but I haven't smoked in 2 days, which is not bad considering I was at a pack and a half a day for 15 years. Oh wow, this is getting a lot more attention than I expected. Thank you so much for the kind words, guys. Yes, I'm vaping. It's 0 milligram juice, but it's really helping with the oral fixation. Also, using Champix and the Vivid Dreams are freaking awesome FYI for anyone considering it. Haven't had any of the adverse effects from it, but we're only on our 3rd week of the pills and just hit the cold turkey of nicotine point a few days ago. My girlfriend is doing it as well. I overcame a smack addiction and have been clean for 9 years. Today marks the first day on my road of recovery. It's my first 24 hours with no alcohol and I can't even remember how long. Very few people knew the extent of my drinking, so while I'd love to share it with everyone because I'm extremely proud, I can't really tell anyone close to me. I ran for 30 minutes on a treadmill yesterday. I can't run on asphalt because my joints are cramp. I can't tell anyone because it's not really a monumental achievement, but I'm proud. Beating anorexia and gaining weight recently. I'm so proud of myself, but I can't tell others because they didn't know I had anorexia. It was my battle and I won. P.S. Thank you for the support and your kind messages. I have to point out that the reason why others didn't really think I had any food disorder is because 1. I had to travel abroad and met new people while I'm already skinny. I was doing great until about 8 years ago where I got cancer in my chest. The trauma and going through the surgery and all, losing my weight and hair affected my body image deeply. Over the years, people got used to the new, skinny me. I struggled hard, I needed support, but I chose to do this alone because there's a feeling of guilt and shame that goes with it, and I thought it was none of anyone's business. It was personal. I played Neopets for way too long, and I eventually traded my way to a UC Grey Cougar with an RN I created during a purge a few years ago. I was so happy that I was crying, similar to what I was doing when I managed to create some epic purge names, and my roommate asked if I was okay. I couldn't manage to tell her why I was so happy. Mine is small in the grand scheme of things, and even in the small scheme of things it's not big either. I've told people of the event, but not why I was proud of myself for it, because I found it kind of embarrassing. Years ago, I was walking home from my university at about 11 at night listening to music, and I thought I heard a noise in the massive park beside me during a lull in the song. When I turned off my music, I could hear crying and muffled screams. Now, I've always thought I'd help someone in need, but was never sure if it was all talk and I was just a coward at heart, as I've always doubted myself. Well, once my mind took its time to understand the implications, I vaulted the fence and just beelined for the noise. When she came into view, I saw a figure behind her. I hit it with such force I tore through a massive bunch of shrubs and uprooted them. Turns out it was just a jacket that had got stuck, but I got up, helped her up and recovered her jacket. Turned out she'd gotten into an argument with someone, run away from them, and had got lost and fallen. So overall, nothing as serious as what my mind thought at the time. I walked her to an address she gave me, contacted the police, and went home. It's a small thing, but it let me know I'll run to a person's aid. I'm not a completely horrible person. That is great. So many of us who imagine ourselves as the hero in any given theoretical crisis will freeze up or get cold feet, look down, and walk away when this sort of thing happens. So well done to you for acting on your instincts that way. Slight exception, since a few people close to me know this story, but it's not exactly something you share at the dinner table. I guess I'm proud that I was able to help this woman find some peace about the situation, though. See, I found her following her on Tumblr, writing a self-deletion note. After a short moral dilemma, I attempted to dox her to her mother, but she didn't respond. Long story short, some other followers managed to get the police involved, but she assured everyone that she was just venting and being dramatic online, and the matter was dropped. She ended things the next day. I sent flowers to the funeral, very far away, with an anonymous note. Months later, her mother responded to my attempted dox and ended up asking me a lot of questions about this girl, with whom I'd only had small online interactions with. Why did she do this, and did people encourage her, were the questions at the forefront. And I spent 2 hours at work messaging back and forth with her, telling her all I knew. At the end, she thanked me and wrote that she would never wish this on anyone and begged anyone considering not being alive anymore to reconsider. So I doubled down on her request now. Don't let an internet stranger explain to your family why you're gone. I posted this here not for karmic rewards, but because I've had people far closer to me self-delete as well. And I wanted to remind everyone that people will miss you in ways you can't even begin to know. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm learning to become a great advocate for my kids' medical and educational needs. It seems like it should be easy as a parent sticking up for your kids, but in reality, when someone with authority says, "I know what's best, they're fine," or "they're getting the best we have," it's hard to say, "You're wrong." My daughter suffered with terrible eczema for almost 2 years because her first pediatrician kept telling us it was normal for babies to have it. We were on Medicaid, it was our first kid, and we didn't know how to argue. Turns out she was allergic to a litany of foods. Easy fix once we knew. Now she has behavioral issues in school. If we, but especially myself, hadn't learned to be strong, she never would have gotten the wonderful IEP and specialist team she has now, which has made a world of difference. When my son wasn't talking at 18 months and everyone said, "It's fine, it's normal," I made a fuss, uncomfortable as it was, and it turned out he wasn't hearing squat because he needed tubes. Now he's 2.5 and speaking full sentences daily. I grew up watching authority figures walk all over my mum. I let it happen to me most of my life. I'm really proud to be improving on that, especially for my kids. That I've managed to keep my job despite having no idea what I'm doing. Everyone just assumes that I must be really good at it, because when they ask how it's going, I always just say, "It's fine, everything's good," when in reality, I'm surprised I haven't been fired yet. I'm in the same boat, but I've admitted to the people around me. People have suggested that I find another job, something with more future, something that pays better, even though my current job has a reasonable future and decent pay. They don't know that if I were to do this job at any other place, I'd be laughed out the door for incompetence. My current job has everything set up in a way that a monkey could do it, and I have no training or useful skill set at all, nor experience with doing my job in a normal way. But everyone thinks it's complicated and high-tech. I hope they don't notice for quite a while. I'm a 31-year-old straight male and I can deep-throat the frick out of a banana. Like a whole banana. I'd like to brag, but nah. Today I had the old double-stream pee and I didn't get a single drop outside the toilet bowl. I went to an Overeaters Anonymous meeting last night, my first one actually. I was out for a drive trying to keep myself from binging when it occurred to me to see if there was a meeting that I could attend. I pulled over, looked it up, and there was one about 20 miles away. I'd be 10 minutes late, but I decided to go anyway. I got there only 5 minutes late, but stood around the corner from the meeting room for 15 minutes before I got the courage to walk in. I sat on a couch next to a gentleman old enough to be my grandfather, and I was the youngest one in there by a couple of decades. I didn't speak except to say my name when the leader asked, and I kept welling up with tears and breaking down. I think it was so overwhelming just to be there, to have taken the first step, and it was unbelievable to me to hear stories of others who have a similar relationship with food. I've applied to the police academy of my nearby big city and have already passed the written test and the oral interview. I didn't think it was likely that I'd pass either one, especially the oral interview, but I did, and I'm scheduled to take the physical test in less than 3 months. And I want so badly to be in law enforcement. My eating habits are keeping me from my dream. So I went to my first OA meeting last night and it was harder than walking into that written test or the oral interview. Much scarier. But I fricking did it. I'm so happy that I did. Well done to you on both passing your tests and for taking the first step on what's no doubt a really intimidating obstacle. It's so damn brave to confront what we like least about ourselves and listen to others vocalize the things that we are sometimes too afraid to look at. With that level of courage, you meet at least one more of the criteria for being a good cop. I've been in a really bad place since I moved to grad school. My ex-boyfriend broke up with me just before I moved here, and I haven't really had a high self-worth since. So I've been crying a lot and have had some low-key thoughts about going away forever. A few of my friends know and they're here for me, but my family has no idea that I'm not completely happy. Anyway, I made an appointment to meet with a therapist. I'm finally trying to get help, and I'm really proud of myself for that. I have a complete collection of Lord of the Rings and Hobbit Lego minifigures. My Marvel Lego collection is nearly complete, save for a couple of minifigures that I just don't like, and my Star Wars collection is complete for the last 5 or 6 years. The only people that know this are my wife, kids, and brother. I have not and will not at any point inform my wife how much the collections are worth. What's the old saying? My greatest fear is that I die and my wife sells my collection for what I told her I paid for it. I'm really proud that I keep going, that I keep finding small, insignificant reasons to keep pushing through. I think things like, who would feed the dog? No one can cover my shift this weekend. My gaming buddy would never know what happened to me. It's too close to the holidays, I would ruin it for everyone. My best friend is really up on her luck lately and I can't tear her down. And it's hard. Every day feels worse and nothing is working. Everything keeps falling apart, and everyone expects me to be this happy-go-lucky person, and how do you explain to them that you can't anymore? I feel like the biggest burden, but I'm proud that even through everything, I can still have hope that it will get better. I can at least be proud of that. I'm truly touched and I would like to express my gratitude. I am grateful for you and all the others who've reached out to me both publicly and privately and just in thought. It's difficult to share these demons in real life, but knowing all of you exist out there, cheering on for a complete stranger, makes up for all the times I wanted to say something but couldn't. I've been moved to tears countless times today with all of your wonderful stories. So thank you all for your hearts, your positivity, and your help. I have several new reasons to get me through the day. All my love. This will probably get buried, but anyways, I'm not particularly good with girls, and I've moved to a new city earlier this year where my friend introduced me to a girl. We hit it off and started dating. Well, due to my aforementioned lack of skills with girls, combined with going to a military academy and then a job that traveled all the time, it had been around 7 years since I'd had a relationship. A few flings here and there, but no relationships, and to be honest, I started to feel like I was never going to meet anyone and end up alone. I was and am terrified of being that weird uncle to all my friends' kids that dies alone. Well, the relationship just didn't work. We had fundamental incompatibilities and I wasn't happy. She, on the other hand, was completely into me and probably would have married me after dating for only a few months after I'd asked. I ended the relationship. I'm really proud of myself for refusing to settle for a crappy relationship, despite wanting someone in my life being one of my biggest desires right now. It wouldn't have been fair to myself, and more importantly, it wouldn't have been fair to her, simply to stay in the relationship waiting for something better to come along. I have exercised 3,450 days in a row without skipping. I'm 62 years old and I walk 3 or 4 miles a day, or work with my trainer, or lift weights. I love to be active and I think it keeps me healthy. That I keep a lot of other people's secrets and I don't say crap. I'd rather those people handle their business than come to me about it, but I guess they know I can be trusted. My girlfriend and I finished at the same time the other night. I don't feel like anyone I know is interested, but I'm pretty excited about it. That's amazing. I could never imagine that happening with me and my girlfriend. I eat so much faster than her. By the time I'm finished, she's usually about halfway through her meal. Well, I just spat coffee onto my own lap reading that follow-on comment, so well done to both of you. I reward you your respective invisible capes for bedroom compatibility and contributions to comedy. I have a patient who herniated a disc in his back and is a blacksmith. He has insurance, so I have to take it, but he has a copay and his wife works, but they now have debt from a failed surgery for his condition. He couldn't afford the copay, so I went to the gallery where he makes wrought iron art and bought it all so he can afford his copay and keep his house. I'm sure you're all thinking, why not do it pro bono? The insurance world in my state doesn't look kindly on charging copays or denying someone insurance benefits when they pay it. I couldn't find any other way to help this guy without it being enticement to come in for treatment, and it was more to keep the stress off a house payment during the Christmas season. So I paid more for his art than his insurance will ever pay me, in hopes that he can keep his house and continue treatment. Either way, I did a good deed, but I can't even tell my wife because I'm not sure she'll be impressed by the sheer amount of money I spent on wrought iron candle holders and lamps that are hidden away in my office. A few things. I really enjoy helping people with computer stuff online. I'm a regular on a certain subreddit's daily questions thread and proud of being able to help. Can't tell anyone in real life because I'd become their go-to tech support, and frankly, they don't treat me as well as the internet strangers that I help. I also started doing video games streaming earlier this year. I only really stream one game per day, anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour, typically. I started a YouTube channel to back up all of my streams. Twitch exports. Yay! And I have next to no followers or subscribers. I forget about followers. I have 4 subs on YouTube, one of which is my brother. So there's no reason to be proud there. The real reason I'm so proud of myself is for sticking to it despite my horrible stage fright. Being in front of that camera every day is terrifying. The possibility that any number of people could see me do something stupid or make a mistake is terrifying, but that's really why I do it. Not just to see if it's fun, like I told everyone. I wanted to force myself to face my fears every day, and I've done it. And I'm still doing it. See you tonight, Twitch. What did you do to push someone over the edge? I photocopied a paperclip 100 or so times, put the pieces of paper back in the drawer, so whenever it's used, the documents have a paperclip on them. My office went nuts. Took it apart trying to find the paperclip stuck in the machine. They even called in a technician. Laughs were had. Glitter. Everyone hates glitter. I came up with this prank a few years ago. Every morning I'd take some glitter, which conveniently came in little vials, and poured some into my roommate's pants pockets while he was out of the room. Usually, I could tell by his morning routine which pants he was going to wear for the day. But even if I got it wrong, those other pants would be primed for the next time he wore them. All day, he, like everyone else on Earth, would put his hands in his pockets to get his phone, keys, or just casually, thereby transferring a little glitter to his hands. He would then touch his shirt, pants, and/or face at some point. For 2 weeks, people would tell him that he had glitter on him, but he was never able to figure out where it was coming from. After going on a rant about how confused and utterly crazed by the sudden appearance of glitter everywhere he goes he was, I came out and told him that it was me. I could have easily done this for a lot longer since he never figured out the glitter was in his pockets, though I became very liberal in the amount that I poured in. When I worked at a banquet hall in a hotel, I had a manager, who we'll call Steve, who treated everyone like crap, calling us stupid, calling us out on things not even the managers above him cared about, and just generally being a butthole. One day he put this annoying memo on the bulletin board about not eating leftover food. None of the other managers cared about this, and it actually went in the garbage if no one ate it. But instead of signing his name, he put banquet management. Well, as a joke, I scratched that out and wrote Steve. A couple of minutes later, he walked over to the bulletin board, sees this, and starts screaming, "Who wrote this?" and then runs down to his boss down the hall and starts complaining. And the guy just doesn't know what to say and shrugs. Well, the entire staff saw this and thought it was hilarious, so we start writing Steve on everything. Over the next few weeks, Steve gets more and more angry and launches an investigation, saying that he's analyzing the handwriting. At this point, he still thinks it's one person, despite the fact that the entire staff is in on the joke. He never figured it out, and I'm not sure how crazy it drove him, but he did get fired for drinking on the job. Ah, restaurant bosses who enforce the rules that no one else cares about. If you're reading this, I want you to know that everyone hates you, and you'll be much happier and more well-liked if you just chill the F out. Sincerely, former restaurant manager. A guy at work was complaining that his spoons were slowly disappearing from the lunchroom. He had bought 6 to work and he was down to 2. Everyone else in his lab hatched this plan. Every time someone sent him an email, at the bottom, in white text, invisible unless highlighted, everyone would write spoon, 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 spoon. We all did this for several weeks, as he had a Gmail account, and that's when he started losing his mind. Every website he visited had ads for spoons and flatware. He thought Google was reading his mind. Not something that someone did to me on purpose, but one that happened nonetheless. At my old rental I had with my sister, for about a couple of months I kept hearing ringing noises. Similar to an old phone ringing, every time I'd walk through the hallway, kitchen, lounge room or dining room, or also when I listened to music on the stereo in the lounge room. For months it drove me crazy. I'd be walking and hear, stop to listen, and lo and behold, nothing. I never caught on to how it stopped every time I looked for it. I thought it was a ghost, humoring myself, or that the neighbor's fricking phone kept ringing. So one day I was looking for something in the kitchen, and I looked on top of the tallest cupboard and found this mother-fricking clock. This piece of crap had one of those old-school bell and ringers on it. Vibrations from walking or stereo made it ring. For fricking months, that clock drove me insane. No one believed me about the ringing. Turns out my mother bought my sister the clock and sat it on top of the cupboard, where it got pushed back where you couldn't see it. So yeah, basically, hide an item that will make an annoying noise where you can't find it. My favorite was the person that sewed someone's sleeve button a little closer every week, so the guy felt his arms were swelling. Script an alarm for 13 minutes past the hour that plays the default system error sound with no visual feedback. I would intentionally mispronounce lasagna all the time in front of my brother, pronouncing it lasagne. He'd correct me every time, then eventually gave up. Then one day he says, "You want lasagne for lunch?" To which I reply, "It's pronounced lasagna." I've never seen his eyes twitch so much. A coworker of mine used the Annoyatron on another coworker for weeks. It's a small device, like half the size of a dollar, that makes a quiet, high-pitched beep at random intervals. It has a magnet on it so you can stick it under a chair or hide it in some pretty hard-to-find locations. Sometimes he'd turn it off for a few days or a week, only to turn it back on when the victim had let his guard down. He'd move it all around the office. The guy started getting desperate after a few weeks of this. He had maintenance come in to take the thermostat apart. He looked in the ceiling tiles and air vents. The icing on the cake was when the prankster put the Annoyatron in the poor guy's car. He used to leave it unlocked during the workday. The victim thought the feds were after him. Whilst my friend and coworker took a break one day, I plugged a wireless mouse into the back of his computer. For the past 2 weeks, I occasionally jog the mouse and he's slowly being driven insane by it. I just emptied a small bag of Skittles into my dad's massive bag of M&Ms. Always a good time. One delightful day, a coworker and I switched a fridge door, which was designed with internal handles for just such a decision, from opening on the left to opening on the right. Took about 10 minutes and a Leatherman to do it. The next day, everyone came in, tried to get creamer, and we delighted in our mischief. Everyone handled it with varying degrees of aplomb, shook the fridge a bit, tried a few times, finally noticed the hinges and went to the other side. Shrugs were had and fricks were not given. The boss finally arrives, gets a cup of coffee and goes for the creamer. Grabs the door on the left and pulls. Hard. Coffee everywhere. But this guy, he knows he's right. He's always right. He's the boss. He sets down his mug, swears a little, grabs the handle again, still the left one, mind, braces his fricking leg on the counter and pulls so fricking hard the fridge comes out of the wall about 3 feet. Everything in the fridge completely tossed about, and we, watching, eyes wide in amused horror, desperately choking back our paroxysms of laughter. Then in walks one of the salesmen, blabbing on his Bluetooth, gets coffee, opens the fridge with ease, notices that everything's messed up in the fridge, looks at the boss with a genuinely puzzled look, shrugs, gets his creamer, and wanders off. The boss swore like a sailor, stormed into his office and slammed the door. Stewed a bit, and then stormed out of the office. He didn't come back for a week. I'm laughing so hard at the memory of this, it took me half an hour to type it out. Try to open a bag of chips quietly for an hour. I don't know whether the perpetrator of this rustling menace did it intentionally or not, but I can imagine being the victim of it in the workplace or while trying to read or study or something, and I can feel my blood pressure rising. In terms of a low-effort way of making someone absolutely furious, it's pretty good. Something I did to my boss. On top of the refrigerator at work is where we keep things like paper plates, paper towels, and plastic utensils. Every day I'd take one of the plastic utensils and place it in the gap at the top of the fridge that's between the freezer door and the rest of the fridge, so every time he'd opened it, the utensil would fall on the floor. After about a week of doing this, he moved the bag of utensils from the top of the fridge to the cupboard next to it, so I started putting 2 utensils in the gap. He finally got everyone together and asked that we stop putting things on the top of the fridge. So with absolutely nothing on top of the fridge now, I put a whole bunch of utensils in the gap. The next day, my boss opened the freezer and completely lost his mind. The penny trick works great. Start by leaving a penny on your friend's desk, chair, coat pocket, places where you'd expect to find a penny. Leave one a day for a while varying the locations. Then start leaving them in shoes, socks, bed, pillowcase. At first, they'll ignore the penny, but eventually it will bug them. It took my roommate 3 weeks until he stroked out one night after finding a penny embedded in his bar of soap. I highly recommend this. Drives them fricking nuts. I wanted to add, go crazy with this. His final straw was the soap, but I really wanted to start putting them in his car and get a coworker of his to play along and start leaving them around his desk. I'm upset that my plans fell short. Someone's been doing this to me at work for over a year now. Frick you! On the upside, you made almost $4. Repeat the last 2 words of their sentence. I'm currently watching Psych on Netflix, and they have a pineapple in every episode. Recently, I've noticed there aren't any more pineapples. Where are the pineapples? My ex used to do something similar to the penny trick mentioned earlier. He found a student ID of a guy with the last name Hoffer who attended our school, whom I'd never met. Instead of returning it to the guy, he began hiding it in random places for me to find, and each time I discovered it, he'd say, "You got Hoffered." Then he'd take it and hide it someplace else. He hid it in my books, my pillow, under my desk, in my drawers, my clothes. He taped it to the ceiling of my shower once, and even put it in my tampon box. The Hoffering went on for a while, and I began to hate Hoffer. I'd never met him before, but I loathed him for his constant presence in my life. One weekend, my roommates and I threw a large party. Who else but Hoffer made an appearance? I refused to introduce him or even talk to him. I just avoided him the entire night. My ex noticed and whispered to me that awful phrase. After I left school, I forgot about Hoffer. Then yesterday, my ex texted me a link to a page that said Hoffer was going to be a contestant on RuPaul's Drag Race, one of the shows I love, The Ultimate Hoffer. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Smile all the time. Change the Internet Explorer icon to the Chrome icon. I convinced a friend to send faxes to a hated coworker's phone line. She was the receptionist and had to answer the phone when it rang. It would drive her insane. There was no way to block the calls or *69 the fax machine back. I'd often time it to happen at really inopportune moments of the day. I worked at a hotel years ago, and would occasionally have the neighboring hotel send people to our hotel. Disgusting riffraff. They'd tell them that we had an insanely low nightly rate, like $35 when it was closer to $80, so the people would show up and cause a big scene about how expensive we are, then yell at us for a while and try to get me to lower the rate. After the 3rd or 4th time of that happening, we decided to start sending faxes to the phones at the hotel's front desk. Depending on how annoying the people they sent over to us were, would determine how long and how many faxes I sent them. This isn't that creative, but it is fun. When you're talking to someone, keep looking at one specific spot on their face, like the side of their nose or something. Don't stare at it all the time, but just enough. If they ask if there's something on the face, act like you don't know what they're talking about. It doesn't take that long for them to not be able to remember what they were talking about. Mail them 3 pink ping pong balls every day with no explanation or return address. Do this for years. Then one day send them a single green ping pong ball and then stop. This one is fricking wild. I love it. They'll wonder what that means for the rest of their life. And they'll have containers full of pink ping pong balls. I don't so much approve of all the plastic waste, and I imagine the postage would add up since you can't really get them in a regular envelope, but it's still awesome. Another coworker. We rolled down his back window one day during lunch and tossed broken glass on the back seat. The next day he showed up to work with it taped up. The following day after that, he took his car down to the window repair shop where the mechanic rolled the window up in front of him. I downloaded the theme to 28 Weeks Later, the really creepy instrumental tune, put it on repeat and left it in our living room, hidden but at a really low volume. My roommate would study in the room all the time, so when it was quiet you could barely hear it. After a couple of weeks, he says the living room gives him the creeps. When you're talking to one of your friends or someone you know, Always stand just a little too close or a little too far away. If you're standing too close and they back up, you back up too. And if you're standing a little too far away and they move closer, you move closer. Repeat. Watch them go slowly mad and probably try to avoid talking to you again. My sister was really passive-aggressive toward her roommate. She used to eat all of the berries out of Kellogg's Red Berries cereal, but leave a small enough amount so her roommate thought Kellogg's was just being a jerk. As a historical note, John Harvey Kellogg was a jerk. Look him up. 3 years ago, I made my wife a lasagna. Sauce from scratch, homemade spinach pasta, expensive cheese, the works. Hours invested, and the return? You should put more cheese on it like at the macaroni grill. I went out that night and brought 6 interior left-hand doors. All of our interior doors were right-handed. I cut plugs to fill the strike plate and hinge mortises, and every few weeks I change out a door or two, right hands for left, left for right. It only takes about 20 minutes now. Pull the door, plug the mortises, spackle the plug seam, chisel the plug from the opposite side, hang the opposite door and sweep up. I painted the first few times, but it's a white jam and I decided the paint smell was more suspicious than the unpainted spackle. It's a thin seam and my wife wouldn't even know where to look. She's never said anything about it, but I've seen her grasp the air where a doorknob used to be 100 times. Screw the macaroni grill. Sing the Batman theme song, na 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 na, over and over and over, but never say the Batman part. You build everyone up for it, and it's just not there. If the person regularly uses a bike, just put some ball bearings inside the seat tube when they're not looking. The rattling will drive them crazy and they won't be able to work out where it's coming from. Then, a week or so later, remove the ball bearings, double the amount, cover them in grease and put them back in. The person will think the rattling has stopped only to have it slowly return worse than ever before. Repeat as desired. While walking outside in a crowded area, start looking up at the sky, shade with your hand, point upwards, and whisper something to whoever you walk with. Then take note of how many other people will spend time trying to figure out what you just saw in the sky. Buy non-brand products and replace your victim's main brands with them, while keeping them in the same main brand packaging. Everything will seem off a bit, but they'll dismiss it. Conspire with friends to send all instant messages to the target in quotation marks. It drives them crazy trying to fix the error or change a setting that doesn't exist. I used to work at my high school's library for my 7th period. All the computers in the lab had a watchdog app that would allow me to take over a computer if necessary from behind my desk at the counter. I was friends with this kid who was a bit younger and was high pretty much all the time. He walked into the lab with his class and sat down at a computer. I checked the names of all those logged in and found his, then slowly began my infiltration. I'd wait for him to look away from his screen, then write in his Word document, "Hello, Matt," next to whatever he was typing. The first time he turned back to the computer, he nearly jumped back from his seat about 10 feet. He then started asking the people next to him if they typed it, and they'd look at him like he was crazy. Then I started getting really intense. I wrote on the Word document, "Look behind you, Matt," and he quickly jumped out of his seat behind him. He asked me who I was and I said, "Who I am isn't important. It's what you've done that matters." He started legitimately freaking out, asked to go to the bathroom and left. I told him later and he was really annoyed. Every time their sports team loses, tie a red balloon to their car. Over time, the stimulus of the red balloon will become attached to the sadness of their team losing in their psyche. Then simply show them a red balloon to reduce them to tears. Aha, the Pavlovian method. There are many ways to carry this out, and all of them are manipulative and cruel. It is a fascinating thing to behold in action, however. Stealing this from the office. If you know someone that has a house phone and uses it daily, or someone at the office with one, every day get in early, take it apart and add 1 penny. Repeat this for months on end until it's a lot heavier than it used to be. Then one day take out all of the pennies and laugh as they smack themselves in the face with the phone. I once worked in an office where there was a legendary feud between 2 managers, Alex and Bill. Alex was an older guy, he was patronizing, arrogant, and had some kind of tenure. Bill was the guy who had to fix Alex's screw-ups. Here's what Bill did. He got sand from outside and sprinkled just a few grains on Alex's chair mat. This made the chair casters grind a little and his shoes slip, which was irritating. spray a dab of really cheap and pungent cologne under Alex's desk. Alex hated perfume and would complain about it constantly. Replace the handset cord on his office phone with one that was horrendously tangled and overstretched. Gently unplug the plug to the keyboard or mouse. It looked plugged in, but wasn't. Tech support learned to hate Alex's constant calls. The file cabinets we had used a spring to close them automatically about an inch from closing. Bill broke these springs so the file cabinet would never close properly. Later, he angled the cabinet forward by shimming up the back slightly so the lower drawer would roll open at the slightest vibration, hitting Alex's chair. Putting bitters in Alex's coffee mug. That crap is hard to get the taste out of ceramic, apparently. Took Alex's legal pads and left them in some humid condition long enough to warp the pages. Unlock the locking mechanism on his office chair back so Alex thought he was falling for a second. Swapped the M and N in Alex's keyboard. Swapped the number pad keys in reverse like a touch-tone phone. Put Vaseline on the tips of the ballpoint pens. Sometimes Bill would just steal stuff out of Alex's desk or swap them with something broken. Alex has a locked office, but Bill had a key to it apparently. Bill was eventually caught and then fired because Alex set up a webcam that snapped pictures and mailed them when it sensed movement. Step 1. Become an excellent pickpocket. Step 2. Specialize in placing things into people's pockets. Step 3. Place things into their pockets while no one is watching. The best things to place are fried eggs, not runny but still a gooey consistency, and a small balloon filled with partially lukewarm water. I call this one the phantom ball bag. My neighbor is a huge fricking jerk. Always being loud, yelling at his wife, the dogs, the kids, among others. Always playing his crappy garage rock, blasting it out of the garage so the whole street can hear. My payback for this is that every night I go over to their front yard and move stuff around. His crappy little garden gnomes, his crappy hose, his crappy lawnmower, and his crappy shovel. Just move all of it around a little bit every single night. Every now and again I hear, "Who keeps moving my fricking shovel around?" Haha, sucker. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.